Chapter 839. Hello, Jiang Hai, what are you doing? Listening to the voice on the other side of the phone, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile. A few years ago, this voice was more familiar to Jiang Hai than Chili because the owner of the voice was also one of his best friends, Su Wei. I'm in South Korea. I'm here to talk about some things. What's the matter? Hearing Su Wei's familiar voice, Jiang Hai asked him. He hadn't seen Su Wei for more than half a year. During the new year, he went back and played with them. After that, Su Wei stayed in the United States and didn't go back for a while. Xiang Hua's wife is about to give birth. Do you know? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Su Wei also said to Xiang Hua. Oh, I heard about it. Is she about to give birth? When Jiang Hai returned to China, Xiang Hua's wife was confirmed to be pregnant. Now that he thought about it, the expected date of birth seemed to be in the near future. Well, he was too embarrassed to ask if you were coming back, so I called you to ask. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Su Wei couldn't help but smile and say. Indeed, this matter was not like a wedding. This gift couldn't be avoided. If he called to give birth to a child, it would be like asking for a gift, so Xiang Hua was too embarrassed. Of course, in fact, even if Jiang Hai knew about it, the gift would not be too expensive. First, Jiang Hai was not a spendthrift. Money and other things were given for free. For example, when others got married, he gave 100,000 yuan. If he had something to do, others would give 500 yuan back. Jiang Hai didn't care. He was not such a person. Second, they didn't pay attention to this. They paid attention to the number of gifts they gave, and all their friends gave the same number of gifts. Whether you have money or not, the gifts are the same. Everyone has to live by themselves. People can't expect others to live. Therefore, when Jiang Hai's buddies got married, Jiang Hai always gave them the same amount of money. He didn't pretend to be rich, and when he was really suffering, he didn't borrow a single cent from his buddies. This was the dignity of a human being. As long as he could endure and cross this hurdle, he would not open his mouth. That was the kind of person he was. If someone was here, he would say it out loud. How could he still be considered a good friend if he made such a clear distinction? Jiang Hai wanted to say that it was precisely because they were good friends that they had to separate things clearly. Of course, it depended on what it was. For example, if you went out to eat or play, it didn't matter who had more money. But if you were borrowing money, since you were good friends, you had to think for the other party. If he lent you money, would his family be unwilling to accept it? Definitely. No matter if it was his parents or his wife, they would definitely say something. Since borrowing money from others is a burden to his family, why should he borrow money from others? Therefore, unless Jiang Hai said that someone in his family was going to have an operation tomorrow and he didn't have enough money, he wouldn't borrow money from others even if he were to sell his house and land. His friends were basically in the same way. Go back, when? Hearing his words, Jiang Hai calculated in his heart and asked him. Go back, when? About this half a month? After thinking for a while, Su Wei said with uncertainty. It should be fine. After I finish my business in South Korea, I will also go back to China. I will make a trip back to Bing City then. After thinking for a while, Jiang Hai said to Su Wei with a smile. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Su Wei also responded. Then the two chatted for a while and hung up the phone. After watching Jiang Hai hang up the phone, the people on the other side came over. What's the matter? Looking at Jiang Hai, Li Shihuai said to him with a smile. Nothing. Whose turn is it? Hearing what he said, Jiang Hai also smiled and said to him. It's your turn. I'm on the green. Looking at Jiang Hai, Li Shihuai also said with a smile. Last night, after he had a meal at Han Jia's house, he went back to the hotel. Just after he came back, Cheryl Li told him that because he didn't have a good dinner today, Li Shihuai invited Jiang Hai to go out to play in their own name tomorrow. He asked Jiang Hai what he wanted to play, whether it was golf or fishing. To be honest, rich people only did that sort of thing. fishing in the sea, playing golf, riding a horse, and so on. There are many horses in Jiang Hai's manor, and he also has a shire horse. Going to sea? He is about to vomit from sitting on a boat. So there is nothing fun about going to sea. As for playing golf, Jiang Hai has never played before, so he agreed to go and have a look. Early this morning, after Jiang Hai had breakfast, he took Cheryl Li and Azalina to a car arranged by Li Shihuai and went to a golf course near Seoul. After Jiang Hai tried out how to hit the ball, they went straight to the actual practice. Playing golf is not as simple as imagined. It is really difficult for people who have never practiced to hit that small ball. Moreover, it is not easy to control the strength. At the same time, there are quite a lot of golf clubs. Jiang Hai has never played this before, so he is not clear about it. Fortunately, Li Shihuai is a person who often plays this kind of thing. So under his guidance, Jiang Hai slowly figured out some tricks. At the same time, he directly bought a set. It is definitely the top club in South Korea. In the future, he can play by himself when he has nothing to do. While he was on the phone, Su Wei called him. After Jiang Hai picked up the call, he continued to make calls. Originally, Jiang Hai planned to come to South Korea for 3 to 5 days. After solving the matter, he will not return to the United States directly. Instead, he will go to the capital first. After all, he and Chi Li have not seen each other for a while. This time, he is so close to South Korea. If he does not go and see her, Jiang Hai will not know what to say. So, he decided to go back and see her first. As for Hua Hua's child, he can also go and see him on the way. Anyway, from his point of view, he has nothing to do at the moment. The cattle in the manor have been bought. The cattle and fish are all on the right track. There is nothing for him to worry about. The only thing he is concerned about now are only 2 points. One is the Native American treasure, and the other is the person who may be related to the dragon badge. It is not too late to return to the United States when there is news about either of these 2 things. As for Li Shihuai, although he also knows that it is unlikely to negotiate with Jiang Hai again, before Jiang Hai leaves, it does not prevent him from building a relationship with Jiang Hai. As long as his relationship with Jiang Hai is in place, if there is anything in the future, he can be considered someone who can speak for him. He has to admit that this guy's vision is very accurate. While Jiang Hai and Li Shihuai are playing golf, the entertainment industry of South Korea is in an earthquake at this time. The source of the earthquake is naturally Girls' Generation. Last night, the photo of Lin Yun, and Kim Taein sitting in front of the Shilla Hotel crying was taken quite clearly. Then, the photo of them getting into a Rolls-Royce was also quite clear. Although the photo of Jiang Hai is not taken clearly, this photo is quite shocking. Although Girls' Generation is not as popular as it was a few years ago, it is still considered a national girl group after all. 2 very famous members getting into a person's car at this time, to be honest, it would be strange if it is not shocked. There is no Weibo in South Korea. The main social network is called Sawonet, and there is also Twitter and Facebook, collectively known as SNS. At this time, on SNS, it is extremely shocking. In addition, in the Orthodox entertainment news, this news is also constantly attracting the attention of the public. In the midst of this storm, the company that the 2 of them were in first issued a statement, saying that the 2 of them appeared at the Shilla Hotel last night because the 2 of them were going to star in a show. Because of the resources, they could choose any show they wanted. Then, perhaps because they did not have a good relationship, they lost control and cried. The person who drove the car and locked them up is a good friend of the 2. If there is any gossip, it would not be so blatant. After reading the management company's words, those who were originally shocked quieted down a little. In the eyes of these people, it is just like what the management company said. If there is really any relationship announcement, it should be with one person, not 2 people. There are also people who directly think that this might be the management company's hype. Other than these people who know but will not say it, or will not think this way at all, there are also some people who know something but will not say it. For example, Lee Shengji. When he saw the 2 women at the Shilla Hotel the day before yesterday, his sixth sense told him that he had been cheated on. Therefore, he frantically called Lin Yun's phone number, wanting to know why, or he wanted to have a clear answer. Unfortunately, after calling for 2 days, he still could not beat her. When he went to the company to look for her, she was not at the company. When he went to wait for her outside her house, she did not go home. This made him quite angry, but as an artist, he also had his own reasons. Although he felt that his heart was about to explode, he still had to attend an event today. Actually, rather than an event, it would be better to call it a party because the person who organized this event was the 4th generation of the Li family. In order to show his positive image, every year, this person would come out to find some celebrities, donate money, do shows, and so on. There were no reporters filming, but it would be published in the newspapers. This was also positive news, so he would not let it go. Chapter 840. Hey, Xingji, here. Li Xingji had just arrived at the gathering place in his van, a golf course near Seoul. Many people looked at him, and he quickly sorted out his mood in the car, and then walked out of the car with a smile. As soon as he got out of the car, someone shouted at him. Hearing the owner of this voice, Li Xingji also looked at the other party, and then the smile on his face became bigger, but there was a trace of disgust in his eyes. He also knew the person who came over. His name is MC Meng. He used to be second to none in South Korea's hip-hop industry, but South Korea had military service. He once escaped the military service, and after he came back, the public didn't buy it very much. So he has always hoped to enter people's eyes through some activities. Li Xingji and him were related mainly because they were both hosts of 2 Days and 1 Night. But to be honest, the currently popular Li Xingji didn't really like this older brother of his. But on the surface, they still had to maintain harmony. Brother, you came so early. Looking at MC Meng who came over, Li Xingji also said politely. Hey, I have nothing to do anyway, so I came over to take a look first, but today, there are really a lot of seniors and actors. You can help to introduce them later. Hearing Li Xingji's words, MC Meng said with a smile. Hearing what he said, although Li Xingji was smiling on his face, he was sneering in his heart. The two of them slowly walked into the golf club as if they were really familiar with each other. Li Xingji couldn't help but nod his head when he saw it. He was indeed worthy of being the legitimate heir of the 3-star Li family. His charisma was far from what ordinary people could compare to. There are a lot of artists who were invited like Li Xingji. Even Han Jia, who had just given birth a while ago and had not yet returned, came with her husband. Everyone was wearing golf clothes at this time, and they were chatting. The most dazzling person in the crowd was naturally today's host, Li Zhihao. Seeing Li Xingji coming, Li Zhihao also greeted him with a smile. Xingji is here. Looking at Li Xingji, Li Zhihao smiled and said. In fact, the relationship between the two was very good. Of course, Li Xingji didn't have the qualifications to be a good friend of the 3-star crown prince. They had a good relationship, but no one knew why. Perhaps it was because they hit it off, or perhaps it was because, after knowing who Li Xingji's girlfriend was, Li Zhihao felt that he would definitely make friends with this person. Mr. Li, hearing his words, Li Xingji immediately said with a smile on his face. MC Meng next to him, after seeing his appearance and Li Zhihao, didn't know what to say. After all, he was eager to get close to such a person, but he couldn't say anything to such a person. He could only look at Li Xingji. Li Xingji nodded. However, it was obvious that Li Xingji had no intention of introducing this person to his brother. I saw the news yesterday. Is there anything wrong? Looking at Li Xingji, Li Zhihao asked with concern. As for why he cared so much, no one knew. Perhaps it was just a form of concern. There's nothing wrong. I just went to the audition, but the result was not ideal. He naturally knew what Li Zhihao was talking about, but now he couldn't say anything else. He could only respond with a smile. Hearing his words, Li Zhihao also smiled. However, just as they were about to say something, some people suddenly came in from outside. Seeing these people coming in, many people in the hall looked at them, and the people over there also looked at them. When their eyes met, many people's faces showed a trace of expression, but they concealed it very well. For example, Li Xingji saw two people he was very familiar with among those people, Jiang Hai and Li Shihuai. At the same time, in the crowd, Han Jia also saw Jiang Hai and remembered what had happened last night and the night before. Her gaze was somewhat evasive, but she knew that this was not the time to panic. After all, her husband was still by her side, so she forcibly suppressed her desire to avoid his gaze and looked elsewhere. Li Zhihao also looked at Jiang Hai, because he also knew Jiang Hai. He didn't know if anyone had any impression of him. Jiang Hai and Li Zhihao once had a feud. The reason for their feud was in Atlantic City. When Jiang Hai went to look for Du Feiman happened to be playing cards there. Li Zhihao was one of them, and he took a fancy to Prawalton. Some unpleasant things happened between him and Jiang Hai, but after returning, he was warned not to cause trouble for Jiang Hai. However, at this time, when he saw Jiang Hai here, he couldn't help but squint his eyes, but he soon gave up. It was impossible for him not to know that Jiang Hai was here, and the reason why he didn't dare to do anything was because he knew that he couldn't touch Jiang Hai now. Not to mention him, even his father couldn't touch Jiang Hai, because to some extent, Jiang Hai was now doing business with South Korea. If he made Jiang Hai unhappy, his family would also suffer losses. Therefore, he only glanced at Jiang Hai, then looked away. The people on both sides didn't seem to interfere with each other, and they just brushed past each other. Jiang Hai and Li Shihuai went to the balcony on the second floor together. They were going to rest there. Jiang Hai and the others came early this morning, and they had already played 2 rounds just now. To be honest, Jiang Hai was still fine, but Li Shihuai's physical strength was already a little exhausted. Jiang Hai wasn't particularly interested in this sport, so he suggested that they take a rest, and Li Shihuai naturally wouldn't disagree. This hall was one of the main halls of the golf club. The first floor was the hall, and people took a small battery-powered car to play golf. There was a place on the second floor for people who didn't know how to play, and for the women. Of course, there were also places to rest and eat. Jiang Hai. Looking at Jiang Hai going upstairs, although Li Xingji still had some headaches, he still remembered that he had offended Jiang Hai. Recently, because of his girlfriend's matter, he had forgotten about it. Now that he saw Jiang Hai, he remembered it. Xingji knows that guy? Hearing Li Xingji's words, Li Zhihao looked at him with some surprise. Although he and Li Xingji called each other brothers, he didn't think that Li Xingji was at the same level as himself. Although he didn't want to admit it, Jiang Hai was indeed at the same level as himself. Jiang Hai's pasture, beef, and fish were very popular in the world now. As the legitimate son of a Samsung, he was naturally very clear about it. So although he didn't want to admit it, Jiang Hai was indeed at the same level as him. This was not a lie. Oh, I don't know him, it's just. Does Mr. Li also know Jiang Hai? Hearing Li Zhihao's words, Li Xingji said a little awkwardly. Hearing his words, Li Zhihao also smiled. He had nothing to hide. I know that guy, but I have a grudge with that guy. Shrugging, he said to Li Xingji. Hearing what he said, Li Xingji's original intention of asking him for a referral disappeared. If there is a grudge, then it's better not to go over and make things worse. After a bright smile, he didn't say much. But during the break, he can go upstairs and talk to Jiang Hai, hoping that Jiang Hai can let him go. Okay, we should go play golf. Seeing that Li Xingji didn't talk anymore, Li Zhihao also said loudly. Then he clapped his hands, indicating that everyone was ready to go. Of course, they couldn't all go. A golf team will not have more than 4 people, most of them are 3 or 2. Even if it's not a serious game, the rules still have to be followed, so Li Zhihao only picked 3 people with better skills and some followers to play golf together. Those who were not selected could only go to the second floor. At most, they could only meet this Samsung's son. However, although they didn't have a relationship with Li Zhihao, since they came to play, they had to play. Thus, after going up to the second floor, everyone either gathered together to chat or swung their poles for fun. When these people went upstairs, Jiang Hai in the distance also noticed them. The place where Jiang Hai is now is the place to rest. After they sat down, Zhao Lina took the tea leaves and cups that Jiang Hai brought to make tea. He didn't dare to drink anything in South Korea. Who knows if there will be any problems in it? Although it's not that these people in South Korea dared to do such a thing to him, it's better to be vigilant. After Jiang Hai's tea leaves were served, Li Shihui was also shocked. The ethnic culture of South Korea was inherited from Huaxia. Naturally, they were also very interested in tea, but unfortunately, whether it was South Korea or another country with an inheritance, Japan, they didn't produce much tea. However, Japan played with matcha, so their tea ceremony was still quite famous in the world. As for the South Korea side, they really don't understand tea. However, those officials, especially the high-ranking officials, are bound to be cultured. Just like Li Shihui, he also drinks tea. However, his tea leaves, which are usually envied by others, are inferior to Jiang Hai's tea. Jiang Hai prefers West Lake Longjing, and these tea leaves were also planted by him. After brewing, the extremely unusual aroma instantly made Li Shihui lose his composure. Give Minister Li some tea leaves to try. Looking at his appearance, Jiang Hai also said with a smile. He has these things. Chapter 841. When he heard Jiang Hai's words, Li Xingji was dumbfounded. He suddenly thought of a possibility. Xinlua Hotel, his girlfriend, the crying figure that night, when Jiang Hai's car drove away, it was as if all these things had overlapped. When he thought of this, his brain was about to explode. What kind of F***king melodramatic scene was this? Wasn't this something that only appeared in those bloody NTR stories? Why did it appear in his body? When he thought of this, he felt that his breathing was not very smooth. His vision darkened and he was about to sit down, but fortunately, he held on. Now, he felt that there was a ball of fire burning in his mouth. His eyes instantly turned red. Now, his first thought was to take a knife and cut Jiang Hai and Lin Yun, this pair of B***stards. Especially Lin Yun, When she was with him, she made all kinds of excuses. What about acting on TV? It didn't count. What about being inexperienced? What about being unfamiliar? These were all nonsense. Could it be that the skills she learned on TV were all given to Jiang Hai? That B***tch, that B***starred. Li Xingji's whole body was trembling as he recalled Jiang Hai and Lin Yun's appearance. It was hard for him to imagine and accept this. He had been cuckolded. Thinking of this, he really had the urge to die. Fortunately, he was a very utilitarian person and was very open-minded. Li Xingji might not be good at other things, singing, dancing, and acting. After all, you couldn't ask an actor who didn't even have acting skills to sing well, right? But his plan for his life was really good, and it was also very strong. He belonged to the wolf type of person. As long as he was given a chance, he would succeed no matter what. He would not allow Jiang Hai to ruin his career, and that included Lin Yun. Therefore, he quickly took 2 deep breaths and suppressed the anger in his heart. He forcibly adjusted his expression and revealed a smile once again. Then, he walked back into the club, but he kept texting Lin Yun. Unfortunately, Lin Yun did not reply. But this time, he would not give up so easily. In fact, he already knew that Lin Yun was at Kim Taein's house. The reason why he didn't go to find her was, firstly, to avoid awkwardness, and secondly, to leave some face for both parties. But now, he had to go. After Li Zhihao returned, he told Li Zhihao that he was not feeling well and left. First, he went back to the company to get his car. After putting on a disguise, he drove to Kim Taeyan's apartment. For a team like Girls' Generation, they naturally had their own dorm room. But to be honest, after they became popular a few years ago, almost no one lived in a dorm room anymore. After the 9 people became 8 people that year, the dormitory became even more deserted, so basically no one would stay in the dormitory. Unless it was very late at night and there was no place to stay, the dormitory would always be empty. And the company naturally couldn't take back the dormitory. This was also one of their privileges. Li Xingji drove to a roadside shop and bought some food casually. After eating lunch, Li Xingji drove to the gate of the community where Kim Tae-yun lived. He waited from noon to night until about 5:00 in the evening. When he couldn't wait any longer and was about to knock on Kim Tae-yun's door, the two figures appeared outside the community. Seeing that the two had finally appeared, Li Xingji breathed a sigh of relief. He immediately got out of the car and came to the two. Although the two were wrapped tightly and didn't have any makeup on, ordinary passers-by wouldn't be able to recognize them. However, Li Xingji was very familiar with one of them, so he stopped them in front of the two in a few steps. "Xingji, Appa." Seeing the person in front of her, Lin Yun was stunned for a moment, then she said somewhat woodenly. Kim Tae-yun looked at Li Xingji in front of her, but there was a trace of vigilance in her eyes. She knew very well that Li Xingji was very smart and very conceited. He should have guessed most of what happened that day, but she didn't know that he hadn't appeared in the past few days. But now that he appeared, it was destined to not be a good thing. She didn't want Lin Yun to get hurt again. Looking at the two in front of him, Li Xingji really didn't know what to say at this time. Looking at the innocent Lin Yun in front of him, he really wanted to go up and slap her, and then tell her, "You bitch, I already know about your scandal." But he resisted because he knew that if he said that, his career would be over. As long as Lin Yun didn't appear in front of Jiang Hai tonight, then Jiang Hai would call Li Shihuai and he would be completely finished. So now he had to beg this woman who made him a cuckold and beg her to save him. But there was really no way to say these words when they were at the tip of his tongue, especially when there was a woman beside him. "Xingji Appa, what's the matter?" Looking at the silent and extremely awkward atmosphere in front of her, Kim Tae-yun thought for a while and said to Li Xingji. Hearing her words, Li Xingji calmed down a little and smiled at her. "Tae-yen, can you let me talk to Yun alone?" Looking at Kim Tae-yun, Li Xingji asked her. Li Xingji was born in 1987, and Kim Tae-yun was born in 1989. The two also knew each other because of Lin Yun, so it didn't matter if they called each other by name. Hearing Li Xingji's words, Kim Tae-yun also looked at Lin Yun. "Oni, wait for me." Hearing Li Xingji's words, Lin Yun also calmed down. She had to face this matter eventually. Taking a deep breath, after Lin Yun persuaded Kim Tae-yun to leave, she motioned for Li Xingji to go to the side to talk. Then the two came to a corner on the side, and Kim Tae-yun stayed where she was. "Xingji Appa, I'm sorry." After walking to the corner, Lin Yun took a deep breath and spoke first. Indeed, she couldn't stay silent for such a matter. In her opinion, this was her choice. Yun, I understand. This matter is not entirely your responsibility." Lowering his head, Li Xingji suppressed his anger and said to Lin Yun, with a smile on his face. Now he kept telling himself that absolutely, he couldn't get angry. "Appa." Hearing Li Xingji's words, Lin Yun's eyes suddenly turned red and she looked at Li Xingji gratefully. "You are Jiang Hai." Looking at Lin Yun's appearance, Li Xingji sighed and then slowly said. "You, how did you know?" Hearing what he said, Lin Yun was a little confused. It seemed that Li Xingji really knew. "A few days ago, because of a small matter, I accidentally offended him. He wanted to send Li Shihuai to ban me. You know Li Shihuai. He is a high-ranking person in South Korea. He is far from someone a small shrimp like me can afford to offend. So today, I went to beg him, but he told me that if I don't want to be banned, then I have to ask you to go to him." Li Xingji looked at Lin Yun. His face was a little ashamed, a little annoyed, and a little embarrassed. In fact, he really wanted to beat Lin Yun up and then fight with Jiang Hai, but he knew that he couldn't. He couldn't deny his efforts over the years just because of these two people. He was already 29 years old this year. He was no longer young. He didn't have so much time to fight, so he had to protect his current achievements. Appa, what do you mean by this?" Originally, Lin Yun thought that she would get comfort and love from Li Xingji. If he could say something like, "Let's start over," she would really be moved to death. But this scene was not right. Why did he tell her that Jiang Hai was looking for her? What did this mean? Yun, can I trouble you with one thing? Hearing Lin Yun's trembling voice, Li Xingji also raised his head and looked at Lin Yun, as he said slowly. Hearing his words, Lin Yun's tears couldn't stop. At night, around 10:30 p.m., Jiang Hai slowly took the elevator back to his floor. The plane tomorrow was ready. Tomorrow, he would go to Huaxia alone, and Cheryl, Azalina, Galina, and Wallace would go back to the United States. Now that the matter in South Korea was over, Jiang Hai naturally had to go back to Huaxia to see Qi Li and the others. The three people there also had to go back to the United States. After Wallace went back, she would continue to control the news. Azalina and Galina had to go back to the manor to protect the safety of the girls. Everything had to be back on track. As for Jiang Hai's own safety, he didn't need to worry about it. Secondly, after he arrived at Huaxia, Du Ning and Qi Li would be there. Thinking of Du Ning and Qi Li, Jiang Hai hadn't seen them for a long time. Last time, Qi Li said that she would go back to find a manager and arrange the company. Then, she went to find Jiang Hai. This time, she was gone for several months, which made Jiang Hai a little depressed. But thinking about it, if she saw Qi Jia and Qia, it seemed that he would be even more depressed. Shaking his head, he didn't think about these things for the time being. He forced himself to be spirited, walked to the door of his room, opened the door, and walked in. But as soon as he walked in, he found that the atmosphere in the room was a bit wrong. Wallace and Galina, who stayed in the room, were looking at Jiang Hai with a funny face at this time. A figure was sitting on the sofa over there. Seeing Jiang Hai coming over, this figure also stood up and looked directly at Jiang Hai. "You really came. That Li Xingji is amazing. He can even invite you over like this." Looking at the woman standing in front of him, Jiang Hai smiled. "This Li Xingji is really good. His charm is really great. He can even invite people over like this, but who is she?" Chapter 842. "Since you're here, let's go in." Looking at Lin Yun in front of him, Jiang Hai smiled and walked into his room. Looking at Jiang Hai's actions, Lin Yun also sighed. It seemed that tonight, this matter would not end well. But then she laughed at herself. This kind of thing, if it happened once, there would be a second time. And this time, it was the man she thought was the closest to her who pushed her into this pit of fire. Tightening her clothes, Lin Yun walked into Jiang Hai's room. Looking at Jiang Hai in front of her, she closed her eyes. "I said that I won't force others to do anything. If you don't want to, you can leave at any time." Looking at her, Jiang Hai sat on the ground, looked at her, and said very plainly, "I only hope that after tonight, everything will return to its original state." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Lin Yun spoke in strange English to Jiang Hai, but her eyes were full of determination. Then she took off her coat in front of Jiang Hai, revealing her perfect figure. "As you wish." Looking at Lin Yun's serious look, Jiang Hai also smiled and walked over. There was no need to describe in detail what happened after that. That night, Lin Yun didn't even know when she fell asleep. But to be honest, apart from the inner entanglement, she was still quite attached to Jiang Hai. That feeling of attacking her soul really made her unable to stop. When she woke up the next day, she was the only one left in the room. The traces of the existence of Jiang Hai and others had disappeared at this time. She only found Jiang Hai's business card beside her. At the same time, there was an address. She understood what Jiang Hai meant. This was to tell her that if there was anything in the future, she could call this number or go to this place. Although she really wanted to throw these two things away, Lin Yun somehow stuffed these two things into her clothes. Then, she packed up and left the hotel. Looking at the rare sunlight outside, she didn't know if the matter had come to an end. In fact, it was indeed so. Since Lin Yun had already come yesterday, Lin Yun didn't know if it was the end of the matter. Jiang Hai couldn't hold on to an artist, so when he left this morning, he called Li Shihuai and told him that Li Xingji didn't have to target him anymore. It was best to take care of Lin Yuner and Kim Taeyin. In order to thank him for his help, Jiang Hai added 10 tons and 100 tons of fodder to the annual 90 tons of Southern Gaoli. Of course, he didn't add this thing because he had slept with a few girls here. It was because he originally wanted to sell these. This could be considered as taking a step back in order to advance. Unfortunately, the people of Southern Gaoli were still cheering for this. When they arrived at the Incheon airport, Azalina, Galina, Hua Lizi, Cheryl, as well as the staff and 2 bodyguards, boarded the plane that Jiang Hai had specially rented. He was already thinking about whether he should get a plane for himself. But even if he had such thoughts, he would have to wait until he returned to the United States. After watching everyone leave, he bought a first-class ticket and flew directly from Southern Gaoli to the capital of Huaxia. Southern Gaoli wasn't far from Huaxia. At least, it was much closer than flying to the United States. Jiang Hai seemed to have just sat on the plane for a while, and the plane had already informed him that it was about to land. After waiting for a while, the plane landed at the capital airport. Jiang Hai carried his luggage, a backpack, and walked out of the airport's special passage. Jiang Hai didn't like to take too many things with him when he went out. In his backpack, there was only a set of clothes, a few pairs of underwear, and a mobile phone charger. That was all, so a small backpack could fit everything. If he needed something, he would spend money to buy it. In any case, he had plenty of money now. After leaving the capital airport, Jiang Hai took a taxi and went directly to the Chi Li group. After waiting for a while, Jiang Hai couldn't help but look at this huge building. To be honest, this seemed to be the first time Jiang Hai came to Chi Li's company. In the past, he had only seen it in some photos at most. Now it seemed that this Chi group was really terrifying. Unlike ordinary companies that rented office buildings, the Chi group itself occupied a huge office building. There was only one company in the whole building, the Chi group. This building was built by Chi Li's father. The location was a little remote, not in the second ring road, but on the side of the third ring road. When building this building, the Chi group spent a lot of money to approve the land and construction. This was also the building of the Chi group at its peak. This building was worth 10 billion yuan, of course, in RMB. Although this building wasn't very tall, it was really a feeling to see such a building here. After getting out of the car, Jiang Hai looked at the huge building in front of him and clicked his tongue. Thinking about himself in the past, it seemed that he really didn't match Chi Li very well. But now, Jiang Hai could afford such a building. After sorting out his backpack, Jiang Hai walked towards the Chi group building in front of him and came to the front desk. At this time, no one knew who Jiang Hai was, so basically everyone turned a blind eye to Jiang Hai. "Hello, how can I help you?" Seeing Jiang Hai coming over, a beautiful girl at the front desk here asked Jiang Hai with some doubts. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also came over. "Sorry to trouble you, I'm looking for Chi Li." Looking at the girl, Jiang Hai said to her with a smile. "Looking for President Chi? Do you have an appointment?" Hearing that Jiang Hai was looking for Chi Li, the receptionist here was stunned for a moment, then asked Jiang Hai with some doubts. With her memory, she didn't seem to have seen Jiang Hai before. "No, I'll have to trouble you to make a phone call. My name is Jiang Hai." Hearing the receptionist's words, Jiang Hai also smiled and said to her. Maybe because Jiang Hai's attitude was good, the receptionist didn't avoid Jiang Hai and directly called Chi Li's office with an internal phone. Since Jing Jin left, Chi Li's assistants became 2. One is Du Ning, and the other is a promoted person, but whether it is Du Ning or this person, they all know Jiang Hai. After learning that Jiang Hai came, Du Ning immediately told the news to Chi Li. "Jiang Hai is here?" A few days ago, Jiang Hai said that he would come to see her, but he didn't say the specific time. Now that he suddenly appeared in the building, even Chi Li was stunned. Then a smile quickly flashed on her face. She stopped reading the documents and jumped out of the office. She took her exclusive elevator and went directly to the first floor. After getting off the elevator, she saw Jiang Hai standing not far from the front desk playing with his mobile phone. She couldn't help but speed up her pace. Before Jiang Hai could react, a pair of small hands covered Jiang Hai's eyes. "Guess who I am?" Looking at Jiang Hai, who was stunned for a moment, Qili deliberately changed her voice and asked Jiang Hai. Who else can it be?" Qili. Hearing Qili's words, Jiang Hai was also stunned for a moment. If he was a veteran in love now, he would definitely tease Qili, but unfortunately, Jiang Hai really didn't feel anything about this, so he just said with a smile. Hearing Jiang Hai's unromantic words, Qili still didn't care and let go of her hand with a smile. Then with a smile on her face, she hugged Jiang Hai happily, and Jiang Hai turned around and touched her hair. Seeing the scene in front of them, to be honest, the glasses of the whole company almost fell off. Qili had always been known as the cold-faced queen in the company. She had the capital to be arrogant, young, beautiful, and powerful. If she wasn't arrogant, who would be arrogant? But such a queen-like woman was quite popular with modern men. Although they heard that Qili was married, few people in the company had seen Jiang Hai, so many of them secretly fantasized about Qili. But now, Jiang Hai and Qili's actions had completely oppressed these people. Regardless of whether they were men or women, they were all stunned at this time. The men came because their dreams were broken, and the women were simply surprised because they had never seen such a smiling Qili. At the same time, they also became interested in this man who could make Qili put down her pride. At this time, Qili only had eyes for Jiang Hai. She didn't care about showing affection to Jiang Hai in front of others. "Why didn't you tell me you were back? I could have picked you up. Let's go upstairs and rest first." Qili naturally held Jiang Hai's arm, and walked with Jiang Hai to the elevator in the distance. When she walked, she almost put all her weight on Jiang Hai. In other people's words, she seemed to be glued to Jiang Hai. The queen they liked in the past showed another side of herself at this time, an even more charming side, but unfortunately, it was not for them. "I want to give you a surprise." Hearing Qili's words, Jiang Hai also smiled, and then followed her into the elevator. As the elevator door closed, the people outside were still speechless for a long time. It was because today's scene had shocked them too much. But in the company, many WeChat groups and QQ groups exploded not long after. For the Qi family, this was a big event. However, while everyone was concerned about the gossip and the real identity of Jiang Hai, some people who already knew who Jiang Hai was frowned because for them, Jiang Hai's high-profile visit to the Qi family this time was still unknown whether it was a blessing or a curse. Chapter 843. Is it delicious? Looking at Jiang Hai, who was eating happily in front of her, Qili sat opposite him and said with a smile. "Well, not bad, don't you want to eat?" Looking at Qili, Jiang Hai asked with some doubts. At the same time, he picked up the rolling donkey in front of him and continued to tear it. To be honest, he likes these soft and sticky foods very much. "I want you to feed me." Looking at Jiang Hai, Qili still said with a smile. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also smiled, then handed the rolling donkey in front of him with his hand and said to her. "Well, I want you to feed me with your mouth." Seeing Jiang Hai's action, Qili pouted and shook her head, then blinked a pair of big eyes and said to Jiang Hai very cutely. Hearing her request, Jiang Hai glanced to the side. After finding that there was indeed no one, he sent the rolling donkey over. Qili also opened her mouth and held the rolling donkey, but she didn't retreat. Instead, she kissed Jiang Hai's mouth directly. Her tongue instantly took the initiative to attack Jiang Hai. Feeling the strength of her attack, Jiang Hai didn't mean to let her go. He stretched his arm and directly pulled her from the seat in front of him and let her sit on his lap. Then the two's lips met and kissed passionately. It wasn't until nearly 5 minutes later that Qili took the initiative to leave because she was a little out of breath. While chewing the rolling donkey in her mouth, she looked at Jiang Hai with a smile, and at the same time, her hand was constantly exploring Jiang Hai's lower part. It can be seen that she has been holding it in these days. After confirming that there was no one else in this office and outsiders couldn't see, Jiang Hai's hand was not so honest. To be honest, Qi Li in front of him is still very tempting. After Jiang Hai and Qi Li went upstairs just now, Qi Li originally asked Jiang Hai to wait for a while. After she finished her business, she would take Jiang Hai home. But maybe it was because she took too long, and Jiang Hai happened to find a box of rolling donkey, so he sat here and ate it. Then after Qi Li finished her business, she came to flirt with Jiang Hai. Just as the atmosphere between the two gradually heated up, suddenly a knock on the door sounded from outside. After hearing the knock on the door, Jiang Hai and Qi Li's bodies shook, and then they couldn't help but look at each other. "We will go home later." Patting Jiang Hai's chest, Qi Li whispered, then stood up, tidied up her clothes, and asked the person outside. "What's the matter?" Hearing that Qi Li returned to the state of an iceberg, Jiang Hai also sat on the sofa again and ate the rolling donkey in front of him. Hearing Qi Li's words, the person outside the door also replied. "President Qi, the elder and the third elder are here." Listening to Qi Li's words, Du Ning's voice also came from outside the door. Hearing Du Ning's voice, Jiang Hai and Qi Li were stunned. "What are they doing here?" Hearing Du Ning's words, Qi Li thought for a moment, then said to Du Ning outside the door, "Let them come in." Then, she gave Jiang Hai a look, telling Jiang Hai to watch out for a while. Then, she walked back to her seat and pretended to check documents. Not long after she sat down, the door of the office opened, and 5 people came in from outside. Jiang Hai knew these 5 people. The leader was Qi Li, who was known as Qi Song's elder, but in fact, he wasn't her biological elder. He could only be regarded as the elder of the family. Behind him was Qi Yuanlong, Qi Li's third uncle, who was also a lazy guy. Behind the two of them were their sons, Qi Liangkai and Qi Jingtao. At the end of the line was Qi Jingtao's wife, who could be considered the only one in Qi Yuanlong's family who was more business-minded. Her name was Lu Si. Jiang Hai had seen these people before during the Chinese New Year. At that time, Qi Song's family had leaned towards the Yin family. He didn't know what these guys were doing here. Thinking of this, his hand, which was originally holding the food, relaxed. He just sat on the sofa and looked at these people in front of him. When these people came in, they also saw Jiang Hai and Qi Li at a glance. The older you get, the more unruly you become. Seeing that they had come in, Qi Li and Jiang Hai didn't even move. Qi Song's face was a little ugly. He usually liked to take advantage of his seniority and didn't do anything, but he still wanted others to respect him. "Xiao Li, your uncle is here. Why aren't you greeting him?" Hearing Qi Song's unhappy words, Qi Yuanlong chuckled. Hearing what he said, Qi Li's face showed a trace of disdain and a sneer. "Uncle, third uncle, you don't come without a reason. If you have something to say, just say it. Your niece is still very busy here." Qi Li looked at the 2 people in front of her with a hand supporting her chin. She didn't speak and said calmly. "You. Okay, then let's talk about business. I came this time to see Jiang Hai. After all, we haven't seen each other for a long time. Secondly, I just want to ask you why Liang Kai's proposal was stopped." Seeing that Qi Li in front of him didn't want to talk to him, Qi Song almost went berserk. He remembered his purpose, suppressed the thoughts in his heart, and then said to Qi Li. Hearing what he said, Qi Li couldn't help but chuckle. "Thank you for your concern, uncle." Hearing Qi Li's words, Jiang Hai also smiled and nodded. He naturally knew about the Qi family's affairs. If Qi Li's father was still here, then they would pay attention to some etiquette. Now that Qi Li's father was not here, Jiang Hai didn't have the intention to talk about these things. He just sat there and nodded. "Now that you have seen Jiang Hai, I will answer your second question. Why did we stop Brother Liang Kai's proposal? It is because we don't have the ability to implement it at all." Looking at Qi Song in front of her, Qi Li said to him very seriously. "Why can't it be implemented? Why can't it be implemented? I have already talked to the customs. It is completely possible to bring in live animals. Why can't it be implemented?" Looking at Qi Li in front of him, Qi Liangkai also stood out from the crowd and said with a face full of anger. In his view, Qi Li was completely against him. Why can't it be implemented? Why can't it be implemented? Because you can't get that cow. Looking at Qi Liangkai's appearance, Qi Li chuckled and then glanced at Jiang Hai. When Jiang Hai heard them talking about live animals and cows, his sixth sense told him that it might be related to him. Why can't you get it? You can get it. This is our Qi family's business, not our family's business. You also have to do something. Seeing that Qi Li in front of him directly rejected his proposal, Qi Liangkai couldn't help but glare at Qi Li and say, "Sorry, this is not the place for you to shout. Besides, I don't quite understand what you're talking about." Hearing Qi Liangkai shouting at Qi Li, Jiang Hai frowned and then stood up. He slowly walked behind Qi Li and said to the people in front of him. He was a person who cared about his reputation the most. When he and Qi Li didn't have a good relationship before, he wouldn't allow anyone to shout at his nominal woman in front of him. Now that their relationship had made some progress, it was even more impossible for him to do so. Feeling Jiang Hai's action, Qi Li couldn't help but smile. Her hand unconsciously held Jiang Hai's hand. "What does this have to do with you? Why are you interrupting?" Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qi Jingtao couldn't help but say. He had to admit that this guy was here to be cannon fodder. Didn't he see that the others didn't say anything? However, although these people didn't want to be cannon fodder, it wasn't bad to let him say this sentence. According to Qi Song and the others, Qi Jingtao's role was just this, nothing more. This matter really has something to do with him, because the cow you are staring at is his. Patting the back of Jiang Hai's hand, Qi Li smiled and said to the people in front of her. Hearing Qi Li's words, the people in front of her couldn't help but be stunned. Qi Jingtao's face was full of embarrassment, Qi Liangkai's eyes kept rolling, Qi Song's face was a little gloomy, and Qi Yuanlong was a little speechless. LVC, who was following behind, still had her head lowered, not letting others see the expression on her face. "Oh, are you talking about my cow?" Hearing Qi Li's words and looking at the expressions of the people in front of him, Jiang Hai was also stunned. After talking for so long, they were talking about his cow, but what was there to talk about? Brother Liangkai and Brother Jingtao saw that our restaurant's beef was selling well, so they wanted to get involved. But the restaurant's shares are 100% owned by the two of us, and we are not going to go public, nor are we going to raise capital, so I didn't want them to get involved. So they proposed that the beef in our restaurant could be provided by them, but they couldn't meet the quality of the beef in our restaurant, so they wanted to import your cow and raise it in China. I heard that it has already been arranged. What do you think? Seeing that Jiang Hai understood, Qi Li couldn't help but smile, and then she said to Jiang Hai. Listening to Qi Li's words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but laugh. Originally, he was still puzzled. Didn't Qi Li say that she would go to the United States to look for him after she came back to deal with some things? Why did she come back for so long and have no intention of going back? At first, he thought that she was held back by something, but now it seemed that it was this matter. Since these cows are brother-in-laws, then everything is easy. Brother-in-law, I have already arranged for the customs. Your cows can be directly transported into the customs alive. We are all relatives. You eat the meat, and we also have to drink the soup, right? I think brother-in-law shouldn't refuse. Since they had found the supplier, Qi Liangkai and the others looked at Jiang Hai. Among them, Qi Liangkai also looked at Jiang Hai seriously and said to him. His words really didn't treat himself as an outsider. Hee, 3 words. Hearing Qi Liangkai's words in front of him, Jiang Hai chuckled and raised 3 fingers. No problem. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qi Liangkai's face flashed with a look of excitement. It can't be done. But unfortunately, Jiang Hai's answer instantly suppressed this excitement. Chapter 844. Bastard, you tricked me. Hearing Jiang's words, Qi Liangkai reacted and roared angrily. Oh. Not bad, your IQ has increased. You even know that I'm tricking you. Looking at Qi Liangkai in front of him, Jiang Hai said with a smile. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qi Liangkai's eyes were about to burst into flames. If Jiang Hai wasn't teasing him, but Qi Jingtao, that guy would have already rushed over and let Jiang Hai beat him up. At present, there weren't many people who could beat Jiang Hai, but Qi Liangkai was used to being gloomy, so he wasn't so impulsive. Jiang Hai, what do you mean? Stopping his son, Qi Song said angrily to Jiang Hai. What do I mean? The literal meaning. With a shrug, Jiang Hai said calmly. Did we father and son offend you? Looking at Jiang Hai, Qi Song said with a puzzled face. He did not remember this. Hee, you are really forgetful. Who was the one who relied on the Yin family and then went to my mother-in-law's house to abuse their power? Looking at the two people in front of him, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile. So in their eyes, that was not considered offending? Indeed, the dirtiest things in the world were politics and business. There was a saying in the business circle that there were no permanent enemies, only permanent interests. Since ancient times, Huaxia had emphasized scholars, farmers, and businessmen. Why did they rank the businessmen, who were highly respected by foreigners, so low? It was because most businessmen had no bottom line. In order to make money, they would do anything. The day before yesterday, they were irreconcilable enemies. Today, they could be good friends who drank and chatted happily. The day after tomorrow, they could kill the whole family because of a small matter. This was the businessmen. Businessmen valued profits and despised righteousness. This was the exact opposite of Huaxia's policy since ancient times. Just like Qi Song's current state. He didn't think that what he did back then was wrong. He even asked Jiang Hai how there was a gap between them. Didn't he know that there was a huge gap between them? Speaking of which, the only person in this room who was not a businessman was Jiang Hai. In the past, Qi Li had always been a pure businesswoman. But now that she was focused on Jiang Hai, she was a little better. We did that for the sake of the Qi clan. I don't think we made the wrong choice back then. It's easier to make enemies than enemies. It's better to have one more friend than one more enemy. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qi Song thought for a moment, but the arrogance on his face was still very calm. That selfless face made Jiang Hai really want to go up and give him a kick. He just didn't know if this old guy could withstand Jiang Hai's kick, so Jiang Hai suppressed this idea. That depends on whether this person is worth making friends with. Your businessman's face has nothing to do with me. In my opinion, since you're an enemy, then you should be prepared to fight to the death. Since you decided to be a traitor and seek refuge with the Yin clan, whether you die or not now has nothing to do with me. Even if you talk nonsense, my attitude will still be the same. Hearing Qi Song's words, Jiang Hai said quite disdainfully. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, 4 of the 5 people's faces changed dramatically. Now, Jiang Hai's words were very clear. He was now enemies with these people. He had already given them face by not beating them directly. How could they still want his cow? Daydreaming. You bastard, what are you talking about? Do you think you're awesome just because you raised 2 broken cows? Today, I'll let you see what your grandpa cheese means is. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the others could bear it, but Qi Jingtao couldn't. As soon as Jiang Hai's voice fell, he directly walked out of the crowd. With a glare and a frown, he was ready to discuss with Jiang Hai. Of course, he was going to discuss with his fists. Jiang Hai was also looking at him with a smile. As long as he dared to show off, Jiang Hai would teach him a good lesson and let him know that he couldn't afford to provoke just anyone. As for the 2 old men, Jiang Hai couldn't make a move, because if he didn't control his strength, it would be troublesome if he killed them. But this Qi Jingtao, Jiang Hai wouldn't be soft-hearted so easily. Qi Li, do you have the same intention? However, at this time, Qi Song stretched out his hand and stopped Qi Yuantao. Then, he stared at Qi Li and said slowly. Before this, their purpose was indeed to bring in Qi Li's restaurant's cows. Then, they would raise them themselves. In their eyes, the profits from the beef were really small. Unfortunately, they had looked for Chile many times, but Chile didn't give them a direct answer. They also encouraged the other shareholders in the company many times. They pressured Chile to merge the 4 restaurants into the Chi family. However, Chile had been holding back and didn't agree. She also didn't confront these people directly. This time, when Jiang Hai came back, they originally thought that it was Chile who asked Jiang Hai to come back to help her. But they didn't expect this guy to be the owner of those cows. No wonder Chile didn't allow anyone to touch those 4 restaurants. It turned out that they were the husband and wife's businesses. This adulterous couple, in the eyes of these people, if they didn't bring them in to make money, it was almost as if they wanted to kill them. Kinship didn't exist here. And Jiang Hai also saw through this point, so he refused very straightforwardly. At the same time, don't forget that Jiang Hai's cows were protected by the American government. At the same time, they were also protected by Jiang Hai. It was impossible to keep them alive, because there was no option at all. Jiang Hai is my husband. Since I'm married to him, I naturally have to follow his lead. Whatever he says, it's what it is. Hearing Chi Song's words, Chi Li also chuckled, and then said slowly. Hearing Chi Li's words, Chi Song and the others' faces were really dark to a certain extent. Since they knew that it was useless to say anything here, Chi Song also waved his hand, turned around, and walked out of the office. After they left, Jiang Hai's brows also frowned slightly. Dad, are we just going to let this matter go? I have already told young Master Zhang. This matter is in the bag. He has also helped to settle the customs, but now Jiang Hai suddenly intervened. Our plans are all messed up. After walking out of the office, Qi Liang hesitated and said to Qi Song. They wanted Jiang Hai's cows, but it wasn't as simple as it seemed on the surface. This matter isn't over so easily. We have to find a way to make them talk. Let's go. Narrowing his eyes, Qi Song snorted coldly, and then slowly walked forward. The others had to endure now, but Qi Yuantao didn't think so. Dad, Uncle, you guys go down first. I'm going to the bathroom. When they reached the floor of their office, Qi Zhengtao, who was walking together, suddenly said at this time, then turned around and ran to the other side. Little C, watch this guy. Don't make trouble for my people. Seeing his actions, the other 3 men couldn't help but frown. Then Qi Yuanlong thought for a moment and said to Qi Zhengtao's wife, Lu Si. Lu Si's father was a general manager of a subsidiary company of the Qi Group. He had a good talent in business, and his daughter, Lu Si, was also quiet and had a high education. After entering the Qi Group, she also showed some talent. Just when everyone felt that like father, like daughter, she actually married Qi Zhengtao. Many people lamented that it was really a flower inserted in cow dung. However, after only a year of marriage, this voice disappeared because unknowingly, Lu Si had become the spokesperson of Qi Yuanlong's family in the company. Qi Yuanlong and Qi Zhengtao didn't have any business talent. Qi Yuanlong just hung the name of a director, and Qi Zhengtao hung the name of a deputy minister, but it was useless. They didn't have any real power. The only people they could control were their secretaries and drivers, but these 2 people were still paid by the group. It could be said that they didn't care at all. On the other hand, Lu Si became a department head of the group. Although she wasn't a manager, she had real power in her hands. Her influence might be greater than her father's. Yes, I will keep an eye on him. Hearing the words of the old man, Lu Si also nodded and said respectfully. But they didn't know that while they were talking, Qi Zhengtao had already taken the elevator to the security department. No matter which company's security department it was, there would always be some people who mingled in the underworld. They didn't expect them to patrol, nor did they expect them to be in charge, but they were paid much more than ordinary security guards. The purpose was to let them deter some of the punks in the underworld so that these guys wouldn't dare to come and scam. After all, although they were related to the Qi Group, it was impossible to be moved by every little thing. Naturally, the Qi Group also raised a few such people. Qi Zhengtao relied on the reputation of his company's direct descendant. Although he didn't mix well with the regular employees, He had some reputation among these people. When he walked into the security lounge, he saw 4 or 5 people in the distance. They were wearing security uniforms, sitting there, smoking and playing cards. The company clearly stated that smoking was not allowed, but for these people, this rule was not established. When these people saw Qi Zhengtao coming, they immediately stood up with a smile. "Oh, Master Qi, you are here. Do you want to play?" Looking at Qi Zhengtao, the security guard here said with a smile. "You are not at the level." Qi Zhengtao said disdainfully as he looked at these people throwing dozens and hundreds of cards on the bench. "Yes, yes, yes. How can our level be enough for you to play? We are just killing time." Hearing what Qi Zhengtao said, these people didn't care. Instead, they laughed and said, "Don't talk nonsense. My wife will come to me in a while. Today, I am looking for you because I have something to trouble you with." Hearing their compliments, Qi Zhengtao also waved his hand, then looked at these people in front of him and said seriously. Chapter 845. I was wondering why there was no news from you after you came back to the capital. It seems that you are in trouble. After these people left, Jiang Hai patted Qi Li's head in front of him and said indifferently under her reproachful gaze. "Oh, yeah, I didn't tell you because I didn't want to distract you, but now it seems that it's better to tell you earlier." Qi Li shrugged her shoulders and said in a somewhat speechless manner. Indeed, this was a matter that gave her a headache. "What the hell is going on, tell me." Pulling Qi Li up directly, Jiang Hai sat on her boss chair, then put her on his lap and asked Qi Li. With Qi Li's level, she should come. The main thing is like this. After hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qi Li also organized her words and said slowly. The main problem was still Jiang Hai and Qi Li's restaurant. At the beginning, Qi Li went to the United States to find Jiang Hai to talk about their relationship, but she happened to meet Prawalton. At that time, Qi Li knew that Jiang Hai was no longer her burden. She couldn't be blamed for being realistic. In fact, the relationship between a man and a woman at home was proportional to their economic status. Since ancient times, Huaxia had always been a patriarchal society. Of course, in many areas, the husband's authority was not respected. But if a woman was asked to find a man who was much worse than her, she might not be willing at first. Even if they were together, this woman would definitely be the head of the family. In terms of age, one was as beautiful as a flower, the other was ordinary, one was rich, and the other was poor. If Qi Li were to choose, she would never like Jiang Hai. This was inevitable. This was also one of the reasons why she hadn't paid much attention to Jiang Hai in the past year of their marriage. This wasn't to clear her name, but to illustrate the reality. Even in an average family, if the man earned 2,000 yuan a month and the woman earned 30,000 yuan a month, then in this family, the woman's words would have the final say, because the man had to rely on the woman to survive. This was reality. On the other hand, Jiang Hai wasn't willing to give up his dignity. Secondly, he wasn't willing to try to change. He wasn't an ambitious person. Therefore, it was no wonder that Qi Li looked down on him. This was indeed a very sad thing. However, after Qi Li went to the United States, she suddenly found that Jiang Hai was not as free as she thought. There was an old saying that gold would always be spent. Oh, it would shine. Jiang Hai's actions in the United States were shining in her eyes. In the past, it wasn't that Jiang Hai didn't have any ability, it was just that his nature was like this. He liked the idea of playing with the world, because facts speak louder than words. Jiang Hai's ability was displayed in the United States. But if Jiang Hai knew that she had such thoughts, Jiang Hai would probably laugh. But no matter what, Qi Li changed a little after that day, especially when Jiang Hai saved her from the mouth of the mountain lion. From that day onwards, she wanted to know more about Jiang Hai. She had to admit that sometimes people were cheap. In the past, when Jiang Hai was guarding her all day, she did not even look at Jiang Hai. Now that she was interested in Jiang Hai, she began to inquire about Jiang Hai's news, wanting to know his movements. In addition to the later contact, she was sure that she seemed to have unknowingly fallen in love with Jiang Hai. But this love came too late. Jiang Hai was already surrounded by a large number of women. It had to be said that people never know how their lives will be. No matter how you plan, there will always be a time when you go astray. If it was 5 years ago, if someone told Shi Li that she would marry an average-looking, greedy, lustful man who was surrounded by more than a dozen women, she would probably take her limited edition Emax bag and smash it directly on the person's face. But 5 years later, this was the reality. It was as simple as that, so simple that she was a little caught off guard. Well, the topic went astray. This time, the crisis mainly came from Jiang Hai's beef. In order to have more contact with Jiang Hai, Shi Li opened 4 steak restaurants in the capital. She introduced Jiang Hai's beef and then began to sell it. There was no other business secret, no advertising, and no promotion, because this was prepared for the top people in the capital. The sales cost really had nothing to do with the wage earners. If they could not afford the sales cost, then don't come. It was a very simple reason. As the restaurants became popular, more things happened. Huaxia people were the second smartest people in the world, especially when it came to doing business. They might not be as good as the Jews who were born to do business, but they were very sensitive to business. After seeing that these 4 restaurants were making money, many people were tempted to invest in them. Some people wanted to come over and take a share, but they were stopped by Shi Li. What a joke! The Qi family was not the top super family in the capital, but it was at the bottom of the first class and the top of the second class. The company had been worth close to 20 billion, but with the addition of the 4 restaurants, it was worth more than 60 billion, which was $10 billion in total. Although it was still far from being comparable to the mega corporations, it was still a terrifying amount. No one could easily touch such a behemoth, or cut off a piece of meat from it. In particular, the Qi family seemed to have some connections in the Middle East, which made the people in the top management even more afraid to act rashly. Since the people in the top management did not dare to make a move, the people in the bottom management naturally did not dare to make a move. Since they could not get the restaurants, they began to think about the raw materials. Many people who had some connections came to Shi Li. They hoped that they could obtain the right to supply the beef. However, when Shi Li just put the beef there, these people left. It was not because of any reason but because they couldn't compete with her. However, it was precisely because of this that more people paid attention to the beef here. But this time, they were not concerned about the supply rights or the shares of the restaurants, but about the cattle. It was impossible to do it openly, so Shi Li and the others who coveted the restaurants surrendered without integrity this time and became the vanguard of these people. They came over because they wanted Shi Li to bring in some live cattle and breed them. In a small way, these cattle would be money in the future. In a big way, it was called improving the domestic cattle breed, which was beneficial to the country and the people. However, in the face of such a big accusation, Jiang Hai only wanted to raise a middle finger and tell them that it was none of their business. Hee, these people in the country are really interesting. Touching his nose, Jiang Hai laughed. It seemed that his choice to go to the United States was very wise. Otherwise, in the country, his manor, farm, and so on would have been occupied by some so-called government officials. A department-level cadre was probably enough to ruin his family. If they got the cattle but didn't study it, they would occupy his pasture. If the pasture was not studied, they would probably study him. At that time, not only would his family be ruined, but he would also die. This was inevitable. Of course, this couldn't be said that Jiang Hai was too pessimistic. No matter what, he had to prepare for the worst, right? Compared to the country, the United States was not much better. If Jiang Hai went to the United States at the beginning and showed his strong side, he would probably be eliminated by those people in the United States in an instant. But now, it was already the 3rd year. It was not an exaggeration to describe his power in the United States as intertwined. The biggest difference between the United States and Huaxia was that the world was based on the gold standard. As a taxpayer, Jiang Hai would become the most powerful person in the privileged class in the United States as long as he did not go against the United States government in terms of principles. But in the country, as long as he did not become an official, he would never become a person of the privileged class. He was really too lazy to deal with the deceit of the officialdom. One wrong step there, and he would be doomed eternally. Are you sure about who is behind those people? Listening to Qi Li's words, Jiang Hai also understood that Qi Song and the others were actually just some subordinates. The people who really wanted to touch his piece of meat should be the people at the top. A second-tier big shot's grandson, but I haven't determined who it is. The other party is very secretive, but don't worry. What you have to do now is to expand your influence in the United States as much as possible. As long as your influence is greater, then these people won't dare to do anything to me. And even if they do, I can still go to the United States to find you. What if we emigrate? Qi Li shrugged. She didn't care too much about this. To be honest, she was very interested in the brand of the Qi Group. She couldn't just watch this company collapse, so she had been keeping an eye on it. However, if it really came to the point where she had to become an enemy of Hua Xia, then she would not hesitate to give up here. Just as Qi Li said, Jiang Hai's place was her escape route. Similarly, her place was also Jiang Hai's escape route. It's really troublesome. Like I said, what I hate the most is these twists and turns. Are you done dealing with things? Let's go home. Shaking his head, Jiang Hai said as if he had given up. He really hated these things. He was not the kind of person who took pleasure in guessing other people's thoughts. He did not like to take risks. He preferred to crush. It was as simple as that. Okay, you go downstairs and wait for me. I'm going to ask the heads of those departments to come up and take these documents away. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qi Li's little face couldn't help but blush. Go home. What do you want to do when you go home? That doesn't need to be said. However, she wouldn't object to this. She gave Jiang Hai's chest a punch and said in a low voice. Chapter 846. After leaving Qi Li's office, Jiang Hai also greeted Du Ning. Du Ning was Azalina's colleague, whom Jiang Hai rescued from Ukraine. To be honest, Jiang Hai really felt that these girls were very useful. Reconnaissance, spying, force, protection, and so on were all quite good. And because they had to do undercover missions before, they all had a good memory and could find their positions in an instant. According to the saying in the acting circle, they were like whatever role they played. When they were undercover to kill people, even if there was a slight mistake, they would die because of it. People who had grown to their level were already able to adapt to all roles. Although Du Ning had never been a secretary or assistant before, after half a month of internship here, she had basically mastered it. Now she was already Qi Li's helper. Although she still couldn't provide her own opinions to Qi Li like Xing Jin in the past, she didn't expect her to do this, right? Now she lived with Qi Li, and some friendship between the two women had unknowingly developed. This was what Jiang Hai wanted to see the most. After telling Du Ning to leave the door open at night, Jiang Hai went to the first floor under Du Ning's blushing face, and then walked directly to the door on the first floor. Although the outside of the imperial capital was now full of smoke, he still liked to stay outside, more than staying at home. But there was a saying that it was easy to come in, but difficult to go out. When he came in, no one came to trouble Jiang Hai, but when he went out, several security guards suddenly stopped Jiang Hai. Looking at their appearance, Jiang Hai frowned, but thinking that these people were also Qi Li's employees, Jiang Hai suppressed the dissatisfaction in his heart and looked at them. What's the matter? Looking at these people in front of him, Jiang Hai said to them. Although these people in front of him were wearing security uniforms, he knew at a glance that they were not good people. What's the matter? Don't you know what it is? Take it out. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the security guards here looked at Jiang Hai and looked up and down. His figure was quite tall and not small, but they had seen many people like him before. So these people had no fear at all. Instead, they came forward and said to Jiang Hai. Things? What things? Hearing what they said, Jiang Hai frowned. What are these guys talking about? Why can't I understand? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the security guard couldn't help but smile. He wanted Jiang Hai to ask this question. What things? You still have the nerve to ask me. Take out the things you stole immediately. Hearing the security guard raise his voice by 2 octaves, the people who were nearby were stunned and then looked at Jiang Hai. Many of these people knew Jiang Hai. After all, Qi Li's attitude towards Jiang Hai just now was not a secret in the company. Although they didn't know the relationship between Jiang Hai and Qi Li, they could see that the relationship between the two was very close. For their goddess in their hearts, being taken advantage of by this guy, many people's hearts were broken. Now seeing that he was stopped here, these people couldn't help but laugh. For such a thing, they were quite happy to see it. People have this kind of revenge mentality. Their goddess and Jiang Hai were so close. Now that it was proven that Jiang Hai was a thief and was going to be punished by the security guards, they were naturally happy to see it, so many people stopped and watched the fun. What? You said that I stole things? Looking at these people, Jiang Hai laughed self-deprecatingly. I stole things? This is a very good accusation. Jiang Hai was amused by the accusation. The money of this great Xia building can't be compared to Jiang Hai's net worth. If he stole things, what did he steal? Hearing this, Jiang Hai understood that these people were looking for trouble, so he crossed his arms and looked at them with amusement. You said that I stole things? Well, okay, what did you steal? Take out the evidence, or call the police, I will help you. Looking at the security guards in front of him, Jiang Hai said with a smile, and then took out his mobile phone. Kid, you are very arrogant. Seeing that Jiang Hai took out his mobile phone, the gangsters here were stunned for a moment. Then, they seemed to remember something and didn't care. They looked at Jiang Hai with amusement. Under the gaze of the leader, they surrounded him. Seeing the actions of these people, Jiang Hai didn't care. He still stood in place calmly and looked at them. It seems that if I don't let you suffer, you won't know how many eyes Ma Wangya has. Go and teach him how to talk to us in this city. Seeing that Jiang Hai didn't escape and was still looking at them so calmly, these gangsters were angry. After the leader gave the order, the people around him rushed over immediately. But unfortunately, just as they raised their fists, Jiang Hai had already made a move. He kicked the person who was the fastest in front of him. The huge force kicked the guy directly from the ground. After flying for about 5 or 6 meters in the air, he fell heavily on the ground. Because the ground here was made of marble, this guy directly slid out and almost slid to the door before stopping. Seeing Jiang Hai's kick create such a shocking effect, the security guards and the people who were watching the fun were also a little confused. This was not what was written in the script. Jiang Hai didn't play according to the script. However, while they were stunned, Jiang Hai wasn't. He came up and kicked a few more times, directly kicking these people in front of him in an instant. These security guards were not real gangsters in the sense. Those green-skinned ruffians and the like might just look fierce, but in fact, they weren't very strong physically. Although these gangsters used to be gangsters, after all, they changed after they had some reputation. Otherwise, they wouldn't be here as security guards. Their biggest role was to shock those gangsters. Sometimes, reputation might not be useful for gangsters. Compared to reputation, combat strength was also a measure. Therefore, these gangsters were still in good physical condition. Although they smoked and drank, they were not small in size. But compared with Jiang Hai, it was useless no matter how strong they were. His physical fitness was 8 times the limit of an ordinary human. How could these guys compare with him? He went up and gave them a series of kicks, sending all of them flying. Of course, he didn't kill them. He didn't say that he would kick these guys to death, but this kick would definitely make them feel pain. What are you still watching there for? Come and help. After most of the security guards flew out, they just covered their mouths and screamed. The leader's physical fitness might be better, so while covering his mouth, he also shouted at the security guards standing outside the door and the people around him who were watching the fun. Hearing his words, these people looked at each other. Some of them had a little hesitation in their eyes, but most of them took a step back. Jiang Hai didn't make trouble here. They came here to work, not to fight. If they hurt someone, or if Jiang Hai hurt them, then the loss outweighed the gain. These white-collar workers weren't gangsters. They didn't have the courage to go up. In their view, their job was very important. After all, if there was any accident and their job was lost, who could they find to reason with? The ordinary security guards outside were actually some good people. If they had that kind of ruthlessness, why didn't they go out to gangsters at such a young age? So for a while, under the roar of the leader, no one stood up. What's wrong? What happened here? But at this moment, Qi Jingtao's voice came from a distance. Then he was seen holding a glass of water and slowly walking over. He had been paying attention to the situation here for a long time. After all, these people were hired by him to beat up Jiang Hai. Hearing that there was no sound here, he was also afraid that there would be an accident. In his impression, Jiang Hai was still the young man with a face mask when he attended the wedding. It was best to let these gangsters teach Jiang Hai a lesson, but if they beat up Jiang Hai, then it would be troublesome. Jiang Hai was Qi Li's husband. Although he thought that he was invincible and the best in the world, to be honest, he was still a little afraid of Qi Li. If Qi Li fought to the death with them for Jiang Hai, then he would have to use some means. Well, who knew where his confidence came from? If Qi Li used the same method to deal with Qi Liangkai to deal with Qi Jingtao, then he would probably be squatting in some prison, crying tears behind bars. This idiot had a lot of dirt on him, but Qi Li was too lazy to pay attention to him. However, when he came over and looked at the situation on the field, he was a little confused. In his opinion, Jiang Hai should be lying on the ground with a bloody nose and a swollen face, but at this time, he was standing in the same place with a calm face, while the people he found were lying on the ground moaning. Young Master Qi, this guy stole something. We wanted to search him, but he didn't cooperate and even injured our people. Looking at Qi Jingtao, who was in a daze, the leader reacted quickly and shouted at the top of his voice. Hearing his words, Qi Jingtao's brain quickly turned. Although he was quite stupid, he still had a mysterious self-confidence. But he had been in the business world for many years, and he had seen some methods that he had not learned before, such as slandering. Jiang Hai, what do you mean by this? Don't think that you can do whatever you want in the Qi group just because you have Qi Li's support. Chapter 847. Does this count as doing whatever I want? You haven't seen what I do even more. This is the lobby. I can be sure that there are surveillance cameras. Whether I do whatever I want or not, you'll know once you check it out. He looked at Qi Jingtao with disdain. Was there something wrong with this guy's brain? If he didn't jump out now, Jiang Hai wouldn't be here to interrogate these people about who was behind the scenes, and he wouldn't be able to make things difficult for them on the spot. Now, anyone with a functioning brain would understand. If he didn't beat up Jiang Hai, he could just close his eyes. However, this guy didn't want to. He had to jump out. If he wasn't courting death, what was he doing? In the past, Jiang Hai had always thought that those brainless second generations only existed in novels or TV dramas, because in the real world, such people might have died long ago. But now, he found that reality was always more fascinating than novels and TV dramas, because this world really didn't lack idiots. Qi Jingtao in front of him was definitely a teenager with a mental problem. Bullshit surveillance. If I say it's your fault, then it's your fault. What are you talking about? You guys, arrest him. Sure enough, after listening to Jiang Hai's words, this Qi Jingtao was like a character in some melodramatic TV dramas. He panicked a little in an instant, but he didn't run away. Instead, he stood in place and shouted loudly. It was almost as if he was saying that he was the sky and the law of the Qi group. Hearing his words, the people next to him moved further away. Now, almost all the people in the company knew that the Qi group was divided into two forces. The first one, which was also the most powerful, was Qi Li's faction. The second one was Qi Li's faction. Qi Jingtao and Qi Yuanlong, who were supposed to be staunch supporters of Qi Li, were the vanguard of Qi Song's faction at this time. Not everyone liked to be a lackey. For high-level struggles like this, most of the people were immortals fighting. They were relatively far away. Although it was good to succeed the emperor, they didn't see those who failed the emperor. Their families would be ruined and their families would be ruined. These ordinary employees didn't have any intention of getting involved in this kind of fight, so after these people heard Qi Jingtao's words, they just stood there. Some even took a few steps back, but no one came over. You bastards, you don't have to come tomorrow. You're all fired. And you, Jiang Hai, this isn't over. Seeing that these people were not moving, Qi Jingtao was also angry. He pointed at the people around him and shouted loudly. But to be honest, Jiang Hai felt a little pity for Qi Yuanlong. Although he didn't have any talent in business, he was still considered a normal person. How did he give birth to Qi Jingtao, who seemed to have an abnormal mind? Did he really think that the Qi family was under his control? Even a sweeper could tell that he had no real power here. He wanted to fire someone? He did not have the authority to do so. He did not have the ability to do so. Who told you that this is over? Looking at Qi Jingtao in front of him, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile. Then he slowly stepped over the bodies of these security guards and walked to Qi Jingtao with a calm face. When Jiang Hai was in the office just now, he found that Jiang Hai seemed to have grown taller. But at this time, when Jiang Hai stood up, he found that this was not his illusion. Jiang Hai had really grown taller. He was almost a head taller than him. Although Qi Jingtao was not very reliable, his height was still quite good. He was about 1.8 meters tall. Now that Jiang Hai was a head taller than him, it meant that Jiang Hai's height was infinitely close to 2 meters. In fact, it was almost the same. Jiang Hai was about 1.96 meters tall. With such a height and Jiang Hai's dislike of wearing leather shoes, he seemed to only have 2 formal suits. The total number of times he had worn them could be counted with 2 hands. At other times, he was wearing outdoor clothes and sportswear. Just like now, he was wearing sportswear with a sweater and a hoodie on the outside. His trousers were also very ordinary loose-legged sweatpants. He was carrying a small backpack on his back. To be honest, no one could tell that he was a rich man. The most valuable Patek Philippe watch on him was also covered by the sleeves of his hoodie. No one could tell that he was a rich man. His most valuable Patek Philippe watch was also covered by the sleeves of his hoodie. No one could tell. At this time, he was also wearing a pair of running shoes. His running shoes were the Air Max series running shoes that were very comfortable to wear. This kind of running shoes was jokingly called the outer height because the air cushion could be seen. When one stepped on it, it was quite soft and comfortable. And the most important thing was that these shoes were about 3 or 4 centimeters high. With these shoes, Jiang Hai was really infinitely close to 2 meters. Now, standing in front of Qi Jingtao, he was very oppressive. What are you doing? What do you want to do? How dare you hit me? Looking at Jiang Hai's size and the miserable appearance of the security guards in the distance, Qi Jingtao was a little confused. However, he was not a person who would admit defeat. At this time, he still straightened his neck and said with a tough face. He had no choice. He had never learned to admit defeat in his life. Since he was a child, his parents had been very indulgent to him. He could have anything he wanted. It was said that the poor raised the son and the rich raised the daughter, but in the Northeast, things were often the opposite. Because the older generation would more or less have some thoughts of favoring boys over girls. Qi Jingtao was the only male in the Qi family. Since he was a child, Qi Li's grandfather and grandmother had been very indulgent to him. It was not an exaggeration to say that they would give him anything he wanted. As the old saying went, the youngest son and the eldest grandson were the lifeblood of the old man and the old woman. When the youngest son and the eldest grandson appeared in the same family, it was not as simple as favoritism. Since he was a child, Qi Jingtao would get whatever he wanted. When he hit Qi Li, her grandfather and grandmother would also say that Chi Li was wrong. Who told you to provoke him? Therefore, Chi Li's relationship with her grandfather and grandmother was very bad. Therefore, people like Qi Jingtao and his character were very much related to the fact that he had never been beaten since he was a child. He was invincible since he was a child. When he was in school, Chi Li's father had already succeeded in starting a business. His father could be considered to have been brought up a little. At least, he was not short of money. He was even more spoiled. Since he was in elementary school, he was a bully. Even the teachers did not dare to control him. When he entered society, his father protected him, so no one dared to provoke him. In the Qi family, it was probably the biggest setback he had suffered, but he only became a small official. At the same time, his father had always instilled in him the idea that the Qi family was passed down to the male and not the female. Although Qi Li was powerful now, she was after all a woman, and he was the legitimate son of the family. In the future, he would inherit the company. He was the master of the family. Otherwise, how could he be so arrogant? In his opinion, Jiang Hai was a stinky beggar. As the master of the family, he naturally could hit and scold as he wanted. How could Jiang Hai dare to talk back? However, he was thinking too much. This was not the ancient times. Jiang Hai not only dared to talk back, but also dared to hit him. Seeing his gaze, Jiang Hai could not help but laugh. He directly slapped him. Slap. With a loud sound, Qi Jingtao was directly slapped to the ground by Jiang Hai. In an instant, his face swelled up. Then, his face was full of anger and disbelief. He glanced at Jiang Hai, who was standing in front of him, and his pupils kept dilating. F***ck your grandmother, I'm going to kill you. Looking at Jiang Hai in front of him, Qi Jingtao roared. He stood up and wanted to wave his fist at Jiang Hai, but unfortunately, Jiang Hai grabbed his hand in an instant. Then, Jiang Hai grabbed his collar with his right hand and pulled him up from the ground. Seeing Jiang Hai lift a person so easily, many people around him gasped. What are you doing? Let go of him. At this time, in the distance, two people walked down the stairs. Seeing Jiang Hai's action, the person in front couldn't help but shout loudly. Seeing this person appear, many people nearby couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. This was because they also knew this person. Qi Yuanlong, one of the founding members of the Qi family and Qi Jingtao's father. Unlike Qi Jingtao, Qi Yuanlong still had some influence in the company. He could even influence the board of directors. Jiang Hai, let go of him. Looking at Jiang Hai pulling his son, Qi Yuanlong roared. Looking at Qi Yuanlong with disdain, Jiang Hai indeed let go. But at the same time, he also kicked the guy's chest, sending him flying horizontally. The guy flew for about 5 meters before he fell to the ground. After sliding for some distance, he began to lie on the ground and scream miserably. Qi Yuanlong's eyes were filled with disdain as he looked at Jiang Hai. His scream was almost the same as the scream of the pig when Jiang Hai was about to kill it. It was harsh and unpleasant, with a trace of panic. You dare to do this, you bastard. Go, arrest him for me. Seeing that Jiang Hai dared to hit his son in front of him, Qi Yuanlong knew that he had never hit his son before. How could he bear it when Jiang Hai dared to hit his son? He pointed at the people around him and shouted loudly. When Qi Jingtao ordered this group of people, these people could ignore it. But when Qi Yuanlong said this, these people had some hesitation. This was because Qi Yuanlong could really fire them, but considering Jiang Hai's strength, these people were a little scared. Let's see who dares. Just as these people were in a deadlock, a cold female voice came from a distance. Then, under everyone's gaze, Qi Li came out of the elevator with Du Ning. She looked at the people on the scene with a strong aura and then glanced at the employees of the Qi family. Seeing Qi Li appear, these employees naturally retreated. What a joke! Qi Li's prestige in the Qi family was not comparable to Qi Yuanlong's. Chapter 848. What? Are you rebelling? Hurry up and get to work. Walking to Jiang Hai's side, Qi Li's body shook. She glanced at the people here. In an instant, many people who were watching the show turned away. They couldn't afford to offend Qi Li. You came at the right time. Your husband hit my son. How are you going to settle this? Seeing that Qi Li came over and intimidated the crowd, Qi Yuanlong also knew that his idea of mobilizing the crowd was shattered. However, this matter couldn't be settled like this. Looking at his son who was still retching, his heart was about to break. He pointed at Qi Li and said loudly, "Oh, well done. You don't know how to discipline your son. My husband helped you discipline him. You should thank us." Glancing at Jiang Hai and seeing that he wasn't injured, Qi Li also breathed a sigh of relief. Then, she looked at Qi Jingtao with some disgust and said very indifferently, this is your brother. The same blood flows in his body as yours. You woman, don't you have any shame?" Hearing Qi Li's words, Qi Yuanlong roared with a face full of anger. In his opinion, how could Qi Li be like this? This was her brother, the baby of their family. How could she let an outsider hit him? Well done, but you hit him a little too lightly. But what's the situation here? Hearing Qi Yuanlong's words, Qi Li just glanced at Qi Jingtao indifferently, then smiled and asked Jiang Hai. These security guards came to make trouble for me. After I knocked them down, the mastermind behind the scenes jumped out. He begged me to hit him, so I fulfilled his wish. Hearing Qi Li's words, Jiang Hai shrugged gently and said to her. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qi Yuanlong trembled with anger. He had never seen someone as shameless as Jiang Hai. Of course, Jiang Hai had never seen someone as shameless as Qi Jingtao and Qi Yuanlong. Don't you feel even the slightest bit of guilt for lying there? It was clearly you who recklessly injured the security guard. My son came over to question you, and then you became angry out of shame and hit my son. Now, not only do you not repent, but you are also inverting right and wrong. Are you still human? Qi Yuanlong roared loudly as he looked at Jiang Hai. Upon hearing his words, many passers-by could not help but lower their heads. Some people were born to be shameless and did not need to be learned. He's really shameless. There are surveillance cameras here. You'll know once you take a look. Hearing Qi Yuanlong's words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but chuckle. He suddenly felt pity for Qi Song. Was it really good to have such a pig as a teammate? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qi Yuanlong waved his hand and said loudly with a righteous look, "My son's character is obvious to all. He doesn't need to look at this at all. Even if he did, who knows if you changed it?" When Jiang Hai heard his words, he was so shocked that he didn't know what to do. This conversation constantly refreshed his understanding of the lower limits of a person's character. This father and son pair was really top quality to the point of making one's hair stand on end. They are really shameless to the extreme. Let's go. Talking to such people is insulting my IQ. With a shrug, Jiang Hai said to Qi Li with slight embarrassment. He didn't know that Qi Li had been facing such an opponent. Jiang Hai talked to him for 5 minutes and felt that his IQ had been pulled down by 100 points in an instant. If he fought with such people all day long, Jiang Hai found it hard to imagine that he could face the world correctly. "Oh, it's good that you know." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qi Li shrugged gently and then naturally took Jiang Hai's arm. At the same time, she looked at the security guards who were still lying on the ground in front of her. "You people have been fired. If you have anything to say, go to the police station and say it." Looking at these people, she once again restored her Ice Queen appearance and said very coldly. Hearing Qi Li's words, these people also smiled helplessly. They knew that this time they stood on the wrong side. Jiang Hai turned out to be Qi Li's husband. Even if they broke their brains, they couldn't imagine that Jiang Hai was Qi Li's husband. Now they really wanted to cry and say that fairy tales were all lies. In their view, Qi Li's husband must be the kind of dragon among men. He had the appearance, height, and knowledge. He was dressed in a suit and leather shoes. He looked like a refined scum. How could he be like Jiang Hai now? He wasn't handsome and wore sportswear. He didn't look like a business elite, nor did he look like a refined scum. Except for his height, he was very ordinary. If he was thrown into a crowd, he wouldn't make a splash. They knew that this time they had kicked an iron plate, so they didn't resist Qi Li's words. If they didn't speak, they could still go to the finance department to get their salary. If they spoke, they probably wouldn't get a fart. And most importantly, they also knew that there were surveillance cameras here. They couldn't count on the police. Like Qi Yuanlong, what his son said was the truth and the law of this world. After all, there were still more normal people. Qi Li, you two murderers. You are a pair of dogs. You don't deserve to be surnamed Qi. Watching Jiang Hai and Qi Li walk out, Qi Yuanlong also shouted loudly. He knew that no one could make a decision for him now. He was also a person who cherished his life. He definitely couldn't risk his life to fight Jiang Hai. So he could only shout there, but it was useless. You have to fight with these mad dogs here every day. It's really hard on you. But why don't you kill them? After leaving the hall, Jiang Hai and Qi Li went directly to the parking lot in front of the company. The Qi group had a total of 2 parking lots. One was in front of the main entrance, with a total of about 30 parking spaces. The other was the underground parking lot, with a total of 2 floors. The underground parking lot was naturally for the company's people to park. The small parking lot above ground was specially prepared for the people who came to do business, the VIPs, and the company's top executives, such as Qi Li and the others. After getting in Qi Li's Rolls-Royce, Jiang Hai and Qi Li sat in the back, and Du Ning went to the front to drive. Jiang Hai asked in confusion. Because these guys were mentally unstable, it meant that there were many loopholes. It shouldn't be difficult to get rid of them. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qi Li slowly said, in the beginning, when I just took over the Qi group, it was not good for me to do it to my uncle and eldest brother. Although they were fighting for power, after all, they were protecting the Qi group's reputation. In fact, it was understandable. Whether it was Qi Song or Qi Yuanlong, as long as the Qi group existed, they were shareholders of the Qi group. Not only were they rich, but they also had a certain social influence. When Qi Li's father passed away, there were many outside companies that wanted to come and break up the Qi group. At that time, although there were internal struggles for power, as long as it was for the good of the Qi group, they were still willing to help. At that time, there was no way to separate them, so they could only integrate all the forces. This was inevitable. Later, the Qi group stabilized. When they were stirring up trouble, I gave them a warning, but the backlash from the board of directors was very fierce. They were all old members of the Qi group, and those old people were all afraid. A new emperor brings in new ministers, and the bow is put away when the birds are gone. Therefore, after that warning, they became more active. Even Qi Song's family was very close to the Yin family. Seeing that Jiang Hai understood, Qi Xian continued to talk. For this period of history, Jiang Hai also knew a little about it. However, after the fall of the Yin family, Qi Song's family restrained a lot. Qi Yuanlong's family's real power was also taken away by me. I thought that if they just wanted to retire in the company or take control of some independent departments, I would let them have it. But I didn't expect that not long after, they would stir up trouble again. Sigh, I'm really tired. Rubbing her temples, Qi Li said with some helplessness. The last time she went to Jiang Hai's manor, she was really prepared to find a professional manager after she came back. If there was anything, she could directly have a video conference. As long as she could grasp the general direction, it would be fine. At that time, she would be with Jiang Hai every day and give birth to a fat baby for Jiang Hai as soon as possible. This was actually the most important thing. But just as she was about to do that, she found that during the time she was gone, Qi Song and Qi Yuanlong made another move. After coming back, she had been thinking about how to deal with these guys, but under the pressure from above and the pressure from the board of directors, it was not so easy for her to get rid of these two forces. Although she could still suppress them, it would be a problem sooner or later. Then how do I deal with these two guys? Touching his chin, Jiang Hai knew the situation of these two guys. It was just like a prostitute on the roadside. What threat did it pose to you? In fact, there was no threat. However, these things existed just like that. Even if they didn't bite people, they would still respond to them. However, it was really troublesome to get rid of them. They might even dirty their own hands. Although Chili wasn't a clean freak, she didn't want to dirty her own hands. In fact, there is no way. Shaking her head, Chili actually wanted to get rid of these two people, but there were really not many ways. So it's like this. Hearing Chili say that there was no way, Jiang Hai also thought about it, but soon gave up. After all, he was not the kind of business genius, and he was not very good at digging traps for others. He preferred to directly crush people instead of playing with strategies. Although Huaxia people had some talent in this area, unfortunately, Jiang Hai did not seem to have it. Forget it, let's not talk about this sad topic. What do you want to eat tonight? Roast duck? Instant boiled mutton? Or do you want to eat stir-fried vegetables? After patting Jiang Hai, Chili stopped thinking about this problem and asked Jiang Hai with a smile. Chapter 849. What Jiang Hai wanted to eat the most now was naturally Chili. After returning home, there was no need to elaborate on what happened next. As soon as they got home, Du Ning sensibly went back to her room with a red face. Jiang Hai and Chili also walked into her room together. After closing the door, the two hugged each other. Their lips touched, and the smoke of war slowly filled the room. As the atmosphere in the room became more and more intense, the equipment on the two gradually decreased. Finally, under Jiang Hai's brute force, the last two defensive equipment on Chi Li's body were forcibly removed. In an instant, the indescribable existence appeared in Jiang Hai's sight. Looking at the existence in front of him, Jiang Hai licked his lips gently and stared at Chi Li without blinking. In the beginning, Chi Li also felt a bit embarrassed. However, the feelings in her heart soon overcame her shyness. In her opinion, she was Jiang Hai's wife. It was natural for a wife to be looked at by her husband like this. So she took the initiative to greet him, and their lips began to fight again. Then Chi Li slowly knelt in front of Jiang Hai and took some indescribable places into her mouth. Feeling Chi Li's movements, Jiang Hai also raised his head. The war had begun. For a war maniac like Jiang Hai, once the war began, it would not end so easily. When they returned home, it was only 2:00 in the afternoon. According to Chi Li's plan, they should reach home at 3 o'clock. Even if they fought, they should stop at 4:00. Then they would rest and go out for dinner at 5 o'clock. It was just right. But obviously, she underestimated her charm and Jiang Hai's determination to fight. The war continued until 5:00 in the afternoon. Jiang Hai's third assault came to an end. Chi Li didn't want to move at all except for gasping for breath. However, the expression on her face was very satisfied. As for Jiang Hai, he was obviously a little tired. After wiping off some indescribable liquid with a tissue, he covered Chi Li with the blanket again. Then, he went to the bathroom to wash himself, put on his clothes, and walked out. "You're finally done." Seeing Jiang Hai come out, Du Ning, who was sitting on the sofa in the living room, took off her headphones helplessly. She didn't have the habit of wearing headphones, but Jiang Hai's voice was a bit loud just now. Although the house Chi Li bought was in a very high-end neighborhood, just this 3-bedroom, 2-living-room house alone was worth 15 million yuan. However, what was expensive was the location. As for the soundproofing of the house, it was really not that good. When she was in the room, Du Ning couldn't stand it anymore, so she came out and sat here to watch TV. Unfortunately, the sound of the TV couldn't suppress the sound, so she put on her headphones and played with her mobile phone. Seeing Jiang Hai come out, it meant that the war was over. She was relieved. "What, you can't wait?" Hearing Du Ning's words, Jiang Hai also came to her side with a smile. he picked her up directly and put her on his lap. One hand hugged her butt, the other hand rubbed her leg, and said to her with a smile, "It's for dinner, you don't want to eat." Feeling Jiang Hai's big hands, Du Ning's body couldn't help but soften. After patting Jiang Hai, she whispered in Jiang Hai's ear. It didn't matter if Jiang Hai didn't eat a meal, but the two girls still needed to eat. But looking at the time, he didn't want to wake up Qi Li. He didn't know how long it would take to go out to eat. Otherwise, he could just eat at home. What do we have at home? We can eat at home. Putting down Du Ning, Jiang Hai asked her. At home? Usually, President Qi and I really don't eat at home. In the morning, we go downstairs to the breakfast shop across the street to buy some breakfast, soy milk, fried dough sticks, or some sandwiches, bread, and so on. Then we go to work. We eat at the company at noon. When we go to the steakhouse in the evening, we eat there. It seems that there are only some small snacks like biscuits at home for dinner. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Du Ning also stood up and scratched her head and said with some doubts. Hearing what she said, Jiang Hai couldn't help but sigh. It seems that these two girls really don't have the talent to cook. Actually, this was normal. Logically speaking, there were not many people who knew how to cook now that each family had one child. Listening to Du Ning's words, Jiang Hai walked to the double-door refrigerator in the kitchen. After opening it, Jiang Hai found that there was really nothing in it. In addition to some water, beer, there were only some snacks, but in the next compartment, there were a few boxes of things. Jiang Hai picked them up and looked at them. It was the sauce for instant boiled mutton. Oh, we had this at home last month. It was delicious, Zhang Xiuying said. Seeing Jiang Hai take out this thing, Du Ning also patted her head and said with a smile. Otherwise, we still eat instant boiled pot? Hearing her words, Jiang Hai thought for a moment and asked her. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Du Ning also nodded affirmatively. Speaking of which, although she is a Huaxia person and can speak Huaxia language since she was a child, she stayed in Huaxia for too short a time. When she was very young, she was taken to Wulan to learn the skills. After the mission, although she performed more missions in the east, she didn't eat much instant boiled mutton and hot pot. Hearing Jiang Hai say that he wants to eat this, she immediately nodded with a face of approval. Looking at her little foodie, Jiang Hai also smiled and ordered what to eat tonight. Since he ordered what to eat, Jiang Hai also looked at whether there was a pot or something like that. He had to admit that although Qi Li doesn't know how to cook, she is really a rich person. Her kitchen is hardly used. However, the kitchen was spotless, and everything was quite complete. Not only is there a normal induction cooker, but there is also a big pot, and there is even an old-fashioned hot pot. Jiang Hai knew at a glance that the kitchen was quite complete with equipment and so on. Since they are cooking now, they are going to buy groceries. Jiang Hai didn't stay in the capital for long, so he is not very familiar with it. But fortunately, there is a GPS everywhere now, so it is very convenient to go to the supermarket. Jiang Hai searched on his mobile phone and confirmed a nearby supermarket. Then, he went downstairs with Du Ning and went to the nearby supermarket to buy mutton first. Although the mutton here is far inferior to the Ujimkin sheep raised in Jiang Hai's manor, he still has to buy it. Today, he is going to eat the capital-style instant boiled mutton. The Xuan-style hot pot needs more troublesome and more things. With Jiang Hai's lack of talent in cooking, just the stir-fry ingredients may be a little difficult for him. Instant boiled mutton is easier. After buying 4 pounds of freshly cut mutton, Jiang Hai went to buy some scallions and ginger, which are used as the base. In addition, he specially went to the seafood area and bought some live shrimp, crabs, and some shellfish. These things can be eaten after cooking. The soup is the best instant boiled mutton soup. Jiang Hai is quite persistent about eating. After buying these base ingredients, it is the ingredients area. Qi especially taught Jiang Hai how to mix the ingredients of the instant boiled mutton soup. Sesame paste, chives, red bean curd, chili oil, salt, sugar, sesame oil. After all these things were prepared, Jiang Hai and Du Ning returned home and began to get busy. Qi Li felt a little thirsty. When she woke up, it was already 7:00 in the evening. She went to the bathroom in a daze and came out to drink some water. But when she saw Jiang Hai busy in the kitchen, she can't help but have a conflict of wanting to cry. In addition to being touched, her heart is more of a warm impact. It would be great if she can see such a scene every day. As for Du Ning next to her, well, she has already been ignored. Awake? Then come and help me. Although her movements were light, Jiang Hai still heard her. He turned his head and saw Qi Li standing there so charmingly. Jiang Hai also smiled and waved at her. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qi Li also smiled and nodded, then walked into the kitchen and helped Du Ning. Not long after, the instant boiled mutton soup was ready. The three of them sat in the kitchen, eating the instant boiled mutton soup and singing. Life is still very wonderful, just as Jiang Hai's side was happy and harmonious. On the other side, Qi Jingtao was sitting at the bar of a bar in the imperial capital with an unhappy face, drinking cup after cup. He was really a little angry now. Today, he wanted to find trouble with Jiang Hai. Not only did he not succeed, but he was also beaten up. His father stood up for him, but in the end, he was ignored. This was enough to make him depressed, but he did not expect that after Jiang Hai and the others left, Qi Song and Qi Liangkai even scolded him. And that bitch Lu Si. She was his wife, but she stood on Qi Song and Qi Liangkai's side. I knew it. This bitch must have had an affair with them. She must have had an affair. Smashing the table, Qi Jingtao felt that his anger was about to erupt. He roared loudly. Hearing his words, the people nearby, who were originally quite lively, unconsciously stepped back. There were many people like this in the bar. They didn't need to freeload off this bad luck. Give me another cup. No, give me another cup. Throwing the empty cup in his hand on the table, Qi Jingtao looked at the bartender in front of him with an unhappy expression. This bartender knew Qi Jingtao's identity, so naturally, he would not refuse to give him a drink. Hearing his words, he took a new bottle of brandy and placed it in front of him. Looking at this bottle, Qi Jingtao opened his hand to take it. However, right at this moment, a hand pressed down on the wine bottle, preventing him from moving in the slightest. Chapter 850. F***CK, who the F***CK wants to die. Seeing that someone dared to press down on his bottle, Qi Jingtao couldn't help but curse and roar loudly. Then he looked at the person beside him, and he couldn't help but be stunned. Because the person standing beside him at this time was someone he knew. It was a Hua Xia, about 1.8 meters tall, but it could be seen that he wasn't small. He was wearing a black casual suit, had a crew cut, and looked very ordinary. He was the kind of person who couldn't be recognized in a crowd, but Qi Jingtao had a deep impression of this person. It's you, what's the matter? Seeing that it was this person, although Qi Jingtao was still very firm, his words unconsciously sounded a little timid because he knew that he couldn't afford to offend this person, and the person behind this person, he couldn't afford to offend him even more. The young master is looking for you. Looking at Qi Jingtao, this person said very indifferently. Hearing his words, Qi Jingtao also glanced at the second floor, and saw a young man standing at the door of a private room, waving at him. Seeing this person appear, Qi Jingtao didn't say much, immediately stood up, took the bottle of wine, and trotted all the way. And that person followed him all the way to the second floor, and soon Qi Jingtao arrived in front of the private room. Hey, young Master Zhang, you're in a good mood, why are you here today? Pushing open the door of the private room, Qi Jingtao said with a smile on his face, and at the same time, he poured himself a glass of wine. At this time, there were a total of 7 people in this private room, but 4 of them were standing. These 4 people were like the person who went to call Qi Jingtao just now. They were all wearing black suits, and their heads were cut with knives and axes. They stood in the corner, and almost didn't move. If it weren't for their undulating mouths, and their heads turning from time to time, it would be difficult to tell that these people were alive. In addition to these 4 people, there were 3 people, 1 man and 2 women, and Qi Jingtao knew all 3 of them. The 2 women who were dressed very simply were the 2 stars of this nightclub. The nightclub was not only a place for one-night stands or a place to collect corpses. In the nightclub itself, there were also some escorts or professional women who couldn't be described. The 2 of them were the stars of this nightclub. It was said that they used to work in the same management company. They were considered all-round artists. They had appeared in professional productions, acted in TV dramas, walked in shows as models, and stood on the stage as car models. Unfortunately, they didn't become popular after their professional productions, and no one watched their TV dramas. Their income as models was average, so they didn't have much fame. After the age of 25, which was the golden age, they came here to be professional women who sold wine. These 2 girls usually didn't go out with others. They just sold wine to earn a commission. If they wanted to go out, they had to be liked by them. The background of this nightclub was very strong. No one dared to use force under the foot of the emperor. Even if they liked someone, it would be 80,000 yuan per person for a night, and this was the minimum. Qi Jingtao also wanted to have some kind of relationship with them. But unfortunately, the Qi group was only a second-rate enterprise at that time. These 2 looked down on Qi Jingtao and didn't agree even when he offered a price of 150,000 yuan. Although the Qi group was now a first-class enterprise, these 2 still looked down on him. In Qi Jingtao's view, these 2 were the top professional women in the circle of the imperial city. According to the ancient saying, they were the top artists. But from this side, it could also be seen that young Master Zhang's ability was here. He needed 2 people to accompany him. As for the man in the middle, needless to say, it was young Master Zhang. I rarely come out for a drink, but you annoyed me. Tell me, what's going on? Looking at Qi Jingtao, who came over with a glass of wine, young Master Zhang casually waved his hand and said indifferently. He wouldn't drink the wine Qi Jingtao brought. First, it was because he didn't trust the wine. Second, it was because he wasn't used to drinking that kind of wine. The wine he drank was the best. Hee, it's just some family matters. By the way, young Master Zhang, Qi Li has already refused to let you buy the cow. Looking at young Master Zhang, Qi Jingtao smiled awkwardly and then sat on the sofa next to him. He deliberately kept a distance from the 3 people. Although Qi Jingtao was very interested in these 2 girls, he didn't dare to do anything in front of young Master Zhang. After sitting down, he took a sip of wine and then said to young Master Zhang, because young Master Zhang was the one who wanted to buy the cow from Qi Li, oh? Qi Li's courage is not small. She can directly refuse. Hearing Qi Jingtao's words, young Master Zhang couldn't help but frown. After sitting up, he picked up a piece of watermelon in front of him and took a bite, and said with some surprise. You know, this matter had been on his mind for several months. Qi Li didn't make up her mind earlier because she was afraid of his existence. Why did she suddenly refuse? A cornered dog will do something desperate? Sigh, it's mainly because his husband came back. No one would have thought that these cows were his husband's. Listening to young Master Zhang's words, Qi Jingtao sighed helplessly. He really hated Jiang Hai to the core. Qi Li's husband, Jiang Hai. Hearing Qi Jingtao's words, young Master Zhang's eyes suddenly narrowed, and then said slowly. Young Master Zhang knows him? Hearing that young Master Zhang actually knew Jiang Hai's name, Qi Jingtao was a little surprised. Hee, only you don't know. Seeing Qi Jingtao's surprised look, young Master Zhang threw the rest of the watermelon into his mouth. He squinted his eyes and thought while chewing. Young Master Zhang's identity was still unknown. But in fact, in China, there were many people who knew Jiang Hai. Some people in politics knew Jiang Hai because when Huaxia and Dubai were connected, Jiang Hai was the one who connected them. Even the emperor had heard about this. It could be said that Jiang Hai was one of the most influential people in the world. It was precisely because of this relationship that the Qi family was not too greedy and did not have any information that could be used against them. No matter how powerful young Master Zhang was, he did not dare to touch them easily. Recently, he knew that although there was no news about Jianghai from Huaxia, Jianghai, pastures, and beef were quite famous abroad. Now that Jianghai was back, he couldn't help but narrow his eyes, but he didn't care, because he couldn't touch Jianghai, not only because Jianghai was well known in China. At the same time, it was also because of Jianghai's current international influence, his territory in the United States, his connections with several manor owners in the United States, his connections with Du Feimin, and now his connections with South Korea. If this fierce dragon didn't express his intention to occupy the river, the original power in the river wouldn't trouble this dragon. Of course, it was impossible for Jianghai to look for trouble with this guy. It was not easy for others to touch him in China, but it was also not easy for him to touch others. After all, this person was not someone the Yin family could compare to. This is Jianghai. He is really hateful today. He dared to hit me. If it weren't for the fact that the Yin family pitied him, we wouldn't even have the money to bury his mother when she died. Now that he has become so powerful, he even dares to hit his master after coming back. Bah, this son of a bitch. Hearing that young Master Zhang also knew about Jianghai, Qi Jingtao couldn't help but vent his anger. He couldn't help but complain to young Master Zhang. After hearing his words, young Master Zhang just looked at him indifferently and didn't say anything. Seeing that young Master Zhang didn't respond to this topic, Qi Jingtao, who originally wanted to provoke young Master Zhang to help him deal with Jianghai, couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed. Cough, young Master Zhang, if you want to be powerful, Jianghai is the biggest obstacle here. With him and Qi Li together, Qi Li seems to have a backbone. It will be difficult for us to put pressure on her. However, Qi Jingtao's face wasn't thin, so he changed the topic to something related to young Master Zhang. Oh, isn't this your business? Young Master Zhang picked up the wine glass in front of him, took a sip, and said indifferently. Hearing young Master Zhang's words, Qi Jingtao couldn't help but feel even more embarrassed, because he really couldn't think of a way. After drinking another glass, he turned around and left with the excuse that he drank too much. Young Master, do you want us to invite Mr. Jiang over and let you talk to him in person? Seeing that there were no outsiders around, at this moment, the bodyguard couldn't help but come over and ask young Master Zhang. His words were very clear, but the meaning was very clear. Should they take action and bring Jianghai over? It seemed that they had done this many times in the past. The reason why Jianghai didn't open his business in China was mainly because he was afraid that some people would come over to invite him. You don't have enough face. That guy's strength is far beyond what you can imagine. However, young Master Zhang knew very well that the current Jianghai wasn't someone they could invite over, so he smiled and said slowly. Then he stood up, picked up his clothes, and waved at the two stars. One on each side, went downstairs, got into his car, and left. At this time, Jianghai didn't know about this. After he, Qi Li, and Du Ning had a good meal, the three of them sat at home and watched TV. At around 10:00 in the evening, Qi Li yawned and went back to sleep. As for Jianghai and Du Ning, it had been a long time since they last saw each other. Sometimes, lightning and fire didn't need to be special. Not long after, there was a low voice in Qi Li's house, but it was only limited to echoing in the room. At around 12:00, Jianghai returned to Qi Li's master bedroom and fell asleep with her in his arms. Chapter 851. The next morning, when Jianghai woke up after more than 8 hours of sleep, Qi Li and Du Ning had already left. After all, it was almost 9:00. Qi Li was very good at this. She was responsible for herself. As long as she was working, she would go to the company at 9:00 every morning, including the time she and Du Ning had breakfast. She had been working for nearly 4 years, and she had never been late. Of course, no one knew whether she had overslept or not. Jianghai sat up in bed in a daze. He went to the bathroom and found a new set of towels, toothbrushes. Looking at these things, Jianghai smiled. Then he hummed a song and brushed his teeth. After everything was done, he directly cooked a pot of hot pot noodles with the hot pot soup from last night. After eating, Jiang Hai sat on the sofa and thought about what to do later. Qi Li and Du Ning had said last night that they would have lunch in the company at noon. If Jiang Hai was free, he could go to the company to find them and have lunch together. In the evening, he would go to the steakhouse to inspect and have a meal. However, Jiang Hai didn't have the habit of eating in a restaurant. Besides, he didn't like to go to Qi Li's company. In Jiang Hai's life, there were two places he didn't want to go the most. One was the company, and the other was the school. It was because he was tired of going to school. Honestly, whenever he saw someone say that he missed the time when he was in school, Jiang Hai wanted to spit at him to death. What he missed was the time when he was a junior or senior. Except for these 2 years, Jiang Hai really couldn't think of any good time to miss. At that time, he had enough credits and was familiar with the teachers. It didn't matter if he didn't go to class. Every morning when he got up, he would play games in the dormitory. He didn't have to worry about eating, because his father and mother would transfer money to his card every month. That was the real stress-free time. Except for these 2 years, Jiang Hai really couldn't think of anything to miss about school. When he was in elementary school, he didn't know a thing. Every day, in addition to studying and doing homework, he might be bullied by other students outside the school, or even be punished by the teachers. Jiang Hai was such a big student, how could he dare to say that he hadn't been beaten or punished by the teachers in elementary school? In junior high school, the gap between the rich and the poor began to show. Teachers treated students who were good at their studies, students who were poor in their studies, students who were rich, and students who were poor. Jiang Hai still remembered his class teacher. She was such a snobbish person who valued good students very much. In junior high school, he was in the 4th grade, but he was beaten by the teachers many times. In senior high school, there was no need to talk about it. From the first year of senior high school, he started to make up lessons. He arrived at school at 6 in the morning and left school at 8 in the evening. He was almost on the last bus back home. When he reached home, it was already past 9. He took a shower and continued to do his homework. It was good enough that he could go to bed around 11. He had to wake up before 5 in the morning, eat a careless breakfast, and then take the bus to school while dozing off. After all, he had to reach school before 6. If you told Jiang Hai that you missed school, Jiang Hai really wanted to scold you to death. What was there to miss? People shouldn't follow what others say. They should have their own ideas. At least, Jiang Hai didn't miss school at all. As for the other place he didn't want to go, it was the company. After Jiang Hai graduated from university, he went out to work. To be honest, working in the company was really similar to going to school. There were 2 types of people in the company. The first type was people who just dawdled. The second type was people who wanted to improve. People who wanted to improve had to learn to have several faces. Most of these people used to be class leaders or members of the student union in school. They flattered the teachers in school and the leaders in society, hoping to be a small official. They had to work like ordinary people during the day and socialize at night. Who would be tired if these people weren't tired? These people were probably the ones who missed school. As for those who were idling around, such as Jiang Hai, they relied on the company. If the company sent them a document, they could finish it in a week, not in 6 days. Basically, they handed in the task on time, and then the rest of the time, they relied on the company. Relying on getting off work wasn't that tiring. Basically, they just needed to get along well with their colleagues. Because they didn't have the urge to climb up, it didn't conflict with everyone's interests. However, this wasn't the life Jiang Hai wanted. This was because there would be this leader and that leader wandering around every day. Although they didn't flatter him when they met, they still had to say good things. Others could also order you to do this and that. It was really annoying. This was Jiang Hai's life from 3 years ago. There would always be someone controlling you, telling you how long you sleep, how long you work, how long you do this, and how long you do that. Jiang Hai was so tired that he didn't feel tired at all. Originally, Jiang Hai thought that this was how it should be, but now, when he jumped out of this circle. After he had money, no one asked him to do anything, no one asked him to wake up at a certain time, no one asked him to work overtime, and no one dared to stare at him. Now, when Jiang Hai was asked to go to these places, he would go to watch the fun. As for the rest, he wouldn't accompany them. Therefore, after going to the Chi group yesterday, he didn't have the intention to go again today. After all, he didn't want to take over the Chi group. It didn't matter whether he went or not. However, if he didn't go, it would be boring to stay at home. He wanted to go to the capital, but to be honest, he had already been to all the places he should go. In addition, now that the northern region had started to try to heat up, the smog in the capital was quite fierce. Jiang Hai didn't want to be a human flesh inhaler. Therefore, when he was hesitating, it was almost noon. It just so happened that there was a roast duck on TV. This made Jiang Hai a little excited. After thinking for a while, he remembered that he had been to the capital a long time ago. He had eaten at the Quanjude restaurant in Dadi, and the taste was quite good. Therefore, after thinking for a while, he prepared to eat a duck. Since this was Chi Li's home, naturally, it was impossible that there was only one car for her to go to work. There were 2 cars in the garage downstairs. One was a red Porsche 911, which she usually drove. There was also a BMW 750, which was more than 2 million yuan altogether. However, it was an old car from 5 years ago. It was Chi Li's car in the past. She used this car to go out to discuss business and so on. However, since she had a Rolls-Royce, she didn't use it anymore. Jiang Hai thought for a while. After all, the Porsche was a car. Although it was fast, it was useless in the city. Therefore, he took the car key of the BMW downstairs. He drove the car and followed the GPS to Dadi. Speaking of Dadi, people in the capital should be very familiar with it. Right in front of the front door was a commercial street, which was called Dadi Lawn. Originally, it wasn't called this name. It was originally called Corridor Sitiao. It first rose in the Yuan dynasty and was established in the Ming dynasty. It began to flourish in the Qing dynasty. However, in 1900, the old lady recruited the Boxers to come to the capital. She wanted to use the Boxers to destroy the foreigners. This was also the excuse that led to the invasion of the 8-Nation Alliance. Then, the old lady declared war on the 11 countries at the same time. It was quite tough, but it also pushed Huaxia into the abyss. After the Boxers came to the capital, they burned down the street. After the reconstruction, it was not bad. The origin of the name Dadi was said to be in the first year of Emperor Hongji in the Ming dynasty. At that time, there was a curfew in the capital. In order to prevent thieves and the like from hiding in the streets and alleys, many streets in the capital were built with wooden fences. During the day, the fences were opened and closed at night, which was more convenient for management. Of course, these had nothing to do with Jiang Hai. After a long time, Jiang Hai found a parking place and entered the street. To be honest, there were many small shops and restaurants on this street. But in fact, this place was more for foreigners. In fact, the locals didn't come here often. The Quanjude that Jiang Hai went to was not the best. But it was the one that suited his taste the most. After entering Quanjude, Jiang Hai found a place to sit down. He ordered a duck inside. This duck was several times more expensive than before. He waited for the dish to be served. Not long after, the chef came and cut the duck into slices in front of Jiang Hai. This kind of roast duck skin was crispy and there was oil under the skin, so it was very fragrant. It could only be eaten when it was just cooked. Otherwise, it would be very greasy. After cutting the duck, Jiang Hai asked the chef to help him cook a soup. Then, he began to roll the dough and eat it. He put shredded cucumber and sweet sauce inside. Jiang Hai didn't eat scallions, ginger, or onions. He could eat them when cooking, but he would pick them out. So when he rolled the dough, he didn't put them in. The meal was finished in a short time. There wasn't a single duck left, but there was a lot of soup left. After paying the bill, Jiang Hai prepared to stroll around the neighborhood. But before he could leave, two men in black appeared in front of Jiang Hai. One on the left and one on the right, they blocked Jiang Hai's way. Seeing this scene, Jiang Hai frowned. He looked to the side and found that there were a lot of people watching the show. They were all looking at him with a smile. Watching a show was the nature of the Chinese. It was the same everywhere. But when he saw that there were people everywhere, and some people were even recording with their phones, Jiang Hai was relieved. He wasn't afraid of people blocking him. What he was afraid of was that someone would dare to make a move on him without him noticing. Since there were so many onlookers, Jiang Hai wouldn't be polite. Looking at the two men in front of him, Jiang Hai went straight to them. At the same time, he said, "Hey, excuse me, excuse me." Chapter 852. Seeing Jiang Hai walk over directly, the two people who were blocking Jiang Hai couldn't help but look at each other. Although they were both wearing sunglasses, they could feel the ridicule in their companions' eyes. Jiang Hai is really arrogant. He actually dares to bump into me like this. Does he think that he can beat me? These people weren't ordinary people. They had all retired from the special forces. They were very familiar with Hua Xia's unique body hardening technique. Even in the face of the black and white ghosts who were more than 2 meters tall, they wouldn't be afraid, let alone Jiang Hai. Seeing Jiang Hai bump into them like this, the two people also gathered their energy in their dantian. They were ready to make Jiang Hai eat a turtle and show their strength. Seeing that they didn't intend to move aside, Jiang Hai also smiled. They would suffer a big loss if they underestimated him. As they shouted to move aside, Jiang Hai had already arrived in front of the two people. With a little force from his shoulders, he directly bumped into the two people's shoulders. The moment Jiang Hai's shoulders touched the two people's shoulders, the two people's faces changed drastically. The expressions of these two people also changed greatly. That huge force that came over really scared them quite a bit. What a joke. How could Jiang Hai's strength be so great? The moment the two of them came into contact, they almost felt like they had been hit by a galloping bull. That force was completely incomparable to humans. However, he had to admit that these guys were elites. When Jiang Hai forcibly knocked them away, they were already prepared to release the force. Their bodies moved horizontally, and they took a step back to the other side. Although they managed to release the force, they still felt pain from the collision. Sorry. Seeing the two people being knocked away by him, Jiang Hai didn't care. After a chuckle, he was about to walk out of the crowd. When the crowd saw that there was no conflict, they couldn't help but twitch their lips. Some people on the periphery had already dispersed. But at this moment, the two people who were knocked away endured the pain in their shoulders and took a few steps forward again. One of them also put his hand on Jiang Hai's shoulder. The moment his hand touched Jiang Hai's body also stopped. What's the matter? Or do you want to blackmail me? Stretching his neck, Jiang Hai looked at the two people in front of him and said with a flat face. Our young master is looking for you. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the man endured the soreness in his arm and said to Jiang Hai. If he is looking for me, ask him to come himself. What's the matter with two dogs? With a disdainful smile, Jiang Hai said to the two people behind him. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the two people's eyes instantly became vertical. They are not stupid. They naturally understand that Jiang Hai is calling them dogs. How can this not make them angry? Since Mr. Jiang doesn't want to, then don't blame us for doing it. Hearing that Jiang Hai dared to scold him and even asked their young master to personally come and invite him, the other person's eyes flashed with anger. As he spoke, he stepped in front of Jiang Hai and punched directly at Jiang Hai's stomach. There are 3 weak points on the human body. The first is the nose. After being hit, the nose will be sore, tears will flow, and the brain will be easily shocked. When fighting with others, the nose is the key point to attack first. The second place is the vital part. Needless to say, whether it is a man or a woman, it will be very sad when the vital part is attacked. The third place is the stomach. As long as the stomach is hit, the person's stomach will twitch, and the whole body will be weak, nauseous, retching, and lose the ability to fight. Looking at this person's movements, it is clear that he wants to subdue Jiang Hai and teach Jiang Hai a lesson, but he does not dare to hurt Jiang Hai. But does he think that he can deal with Jiang Hai like this? He is really naive. Looking at the other person's fist, Jiang Hai did not dodge. He just looked at the other person with a smile. Bang! With a muffled sound, the person's fist hit Jiang Hai's stomach. Then, he raised his head proudly. So what if he is strong? He has not learned professional fighting skills. How can he be a match for masters like them who have seen blood and killed people before? But when he raised his head, he was a little confused because Jiang Hai did not slowly fall down while holding his stomach as he thought. Instead, he stood there, picked his nose, and looked at him with slight disdain. You attacked first. I was just defending myself. Looking at the person in front of him, Jiang Hai said with a chuckle. After hearing Jiang Hai's words, the pupils of the two people here could not help but shake. Then, they wanted to withdraw and retreat, but unfortunately, Jiang Hai's strength is not comparable to theirs. His speed is also not comparable to theirs. At the moment when they were about to retreat, Jiang Hai came in front of the first person and directly punched the other person's stomach. He has already restrained his strength in this blow, but even if he has restrained his strength, it is still not comparable to this ordinary person. These people have not reached the limit of the human body. Jiang Hai, who is 8 times the limit of the human body, is this not courting death? With a muffled bang, Jiang Hai's hand had already made intimate contact with the person's stomach. In an instant, like in a cartoon, this person was sent flying with one punch. He directly smashed into some people who were watching the show in the distance. These people also suffered an unexpected disaster. Seeing this punch, a lot of people fell down. The people next to them could not help but take a few steps back. What a joke, they were just watching the show and did not want to be beaten up, but these people were at most hit, and it was a little painful. But that person was miserable. After falling to the ground, he began to retch on the ground and instantly lost his fighting strength. Not only did he vomit everything in his stomach, but he also vomited acid and bile. It was really because Jiang Hai's punch was really not something he could withstand. Seeing that his companion was beaten, the person who was about to retreat over there was stunned for a moment. He subconsciously wanted to avenge his companion. No matter how bad it was, he had to save his companion. But his reason told him that he could not go. If he went, he would be finished. But did he think that he would not be finished if he did not go? Naive. While dealing with this person, Yi Zichen and the others were all dead. Jiang Hai's feet stepped on the ground, and with the rebound force, he instantly floated to the person's side. He also punched out, and then the person also lay on the ground and vomited. Looking at the appearance of these two people, Jiang Hai chuckled. Then, he thoughtfully glanced at an antique building in the distance. He could feel that there was a pair of eyes over there, seemingly observing this place. If he was not mistaken, the person over there should be related to this place. Jiang Hai was now considered to be skilled and bold. After seeing that the two people were dealt with, Jiang Hai went straight to the building in the distance. Although he was a person who was afraid of death, he was not timid when he was sure that he would not die. According to Jiang Hai's estimation, he did not seem to have any enemies in the capital at present. The only enemies were Qi Li and Qi Song's family. But just like how they still had to recognize their relatives, Qi Li could not and did not dare to find someone to deal with him. Because if they played dirty, Qi Li could kill them at any time. This was also the rule of the game. And the one who had the ability to cause trouble for Jiang Hai, what kind of young master was it? Most likely, it was related to the beef or the forage. In other words, it was the person behind Qi Song and Qi Yuanlong. Since he was here and concluded that the other party would not dare to do anything to him, how could Jiang Hai not come to meet him? At least he had to know who his opponent was. In a few steps, Jiang Hai arrived in front of the small building. This small building was not high and looked like it only had 2 floors. The decoration was antique. There was a plaque in front of the door with 3 words written on it, Guangda Building. Of course, there were some small words next to it, but Jiang Hai was too lazy to look at them. When Jiang Hai walked to Guangda Building, there was already a black-clothed person like the 2 people just now who had been waiting for a long time. Seeing Jiang Hai coming over, the person clenched his fist but still loosened it. Then, he made a gesture of invitation. He naturally knew that Jiang Hai had killed his 2 companions, but he could not have a conflict with Jiang Hai now. He knew that the 2 companions were not worse than him. If there was a conflict now, he would probably have to lie down. He was not afraid of lying down, but he still remembered what his master wanted him to do. Seeing his action, Jiang Hai did not care. He went straight to the 2nd floor and took a look when he went upstairs. At this time, there should be a show in Guangda Building, so it was a little noisy. After going up to the 2nd floor, not long after, he saw a private room with a black-clothed bodyguard standing at the door. Needless to say, this was the private room. Seeing Jiang Hai come up, the bodyguard also pushed the door open and motioned for Jiang Hai to go in. Jiang Hai did not care and just strolled in. After entering the private room, Jiang Hai saw a person sitting in the middle of the room. The other table was empty. After a glance, Jiang Hai walked over and sat on the other side. "Hello, Mr. Jiang." Seeing Jiang Hai sit down, the young man, who looked 25 or 26 years old, took a sip of tea. Then, without looking at Jiang Hai, he said with a smile, "If you have something to say, just say it. I'm going out in the afternoon." Glancing at this person, Jiang Hai casually grabbed a handful of sunflower seeds and ate them while looking at the stage in the distance. He was just wondering why it was so noisy. It turned out that there was a crosstalk performance here. However, Jiang Hai did not know the actors on the stage, and the reaction of the audience could only be regarded as ordinary. "I heard that Mr. Jiang likes to listen to crosstalk, so I specially chose this place. This is the youth team of Dian Society. It's just an ordinary performance, but it's also Zhu Zhu Xing. I asked Mr. Jiang to come here mainly for a business deal." Seeing that Jiang Hai did not seem to be very interested in this crosstalk performance, the young man on the other side laughed and said, Chapter 853. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai chuckled as he ate his sunflower seeds. Although this person didn't say who he was, Jiang Hai knew that this guy's influence in the country was definitely not small. Knowing that he was here meant that he was paying attention to him. Knowing that he liked to listen to crosstalk meant that he had investigated him. He even knew about these small details. It was impossible that he didn't know about some basic information. Considering that he had appeared here, he knew that this person was watching him. From this point of view, it was clear that this person was watching him. Coupled with those bodyguards and his current fearless appearance, Jiang Hai knew that this guy should be 70% sure that he was the person behind Qi Song and Qi Yuanlong. However, although he had a considerable status in the country, Jiang Hai wanted to say, "It's none of your business." His focus wasn't on the country. Jiang Hai was like this in all aspects. There were only times when others begged him, not when he begged others. This was because before he did anything, he had already paved the way for himself. Although the man in front of him wasn't someone to be trifled with, was he, Jiang Hai, someone to be trifled with? What a joke. Perhaps Jiang Hai couldn't compete with a big country like Huaxia, but he definitely wouldn't be easily manipulated by someone in the country. In Jiang Hai's opinion, there were many people in the country who had the ability to cause trouble for him, but this young man wasn't qualified. "I like to talk to smart people, but I don't like to talk to people who are too smart. Talking to smart people can save a lot of effort. As long as I point it out, they will know what they can and can't do. It also saves me a lot of effort." Seeing that Jiang Hai didn't respond, the young man chuckled. Then he picked up his teacup and drank while shaking his head. He didn't care if Jiang Hai heard him or not. He continued talking. "But I can't talk to people who are too smart because these people are really too smart. I don't have a trace of fear in my heart. I'm used to being high and mighty and looking at others with a gaze of charity. But when there are people who are on equal footing with me, I'm not so happy. He didn't look at Jiang Hai and spoke slowly. This is an illness that needs to be treated. Although I have never believed that all living things are equal, I also don't believe that there is such a thing as being superior to others. It's not an imperial system now, is it? Hearing this person's words, Jiang Hai chuckled. There were many people he cared about, such as those big families in the United States, the President of the United States, and those high-ranking officials. There were also people in China, such as the Emperor of China, and the 12 people who stood at the peak of power. No, not to mention those people, even if it was a minister, Jiang Hai had to be polite to him. But if it was the son of the minister, the grandson of the minister, and so on, Jiang Hai didn't have to be so polite. You're just too smart. Fortunately, you're not in China now, right? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the man chuckled. Although the two of them were talking in riddles, the meaning was already conveyed. Fortunately, I'm not in China, right? Looking at this person, Jiang Hai also chuckled and said to him. Just now, the conversation between the two men seemed ordinary. It could even be said that it was a bit messy. But in fact, the main meaning, if translated, was something like this. What the man said was to Jiang Hai, you can't beat me. You don't have to play around with your little tricks. Do you think you can be on equal footing with me? You're just a rich man. And the meaning of Jiang Hai's words was, I'm just a rich man, but I'm not someone you can touch. You can't control me. No matter how powerful your power is, it has nothing to do with me. And do you dare to touch me? It's a legal system now, not an imperial system. The confrontation between the two of them flashed by, but it also sounded out the other party's intention. This man's idea was to suppress Jiang Hai with his power, and Jiang Hai's choice was to confront him head-on. If you have the ability, come and find trouble with me. If you don't have the ability, just sit there and do nothing. The two of them picked up their teacups almost at the same time, took a sip, and then put it down. Then the man stood up. I think we'll meet again in the future. Looking at Jiang Hai, the man said and took the initiative to leave. Jiang Hai also curled his lips. It didn't matter if they met or not, but it was up to him to sell or not. He wasn't worried about himself now. With his skills, even if no one protected him, he could live well. As for Qi Li, there wouldn't be any problems with Du Ning. But don't forget one thing. Fortresses were conquered from the inside. After this guy saw him, the Qi family would probably take action. Fortunately, when Qi Li wanted to open a restaurant, the shareholders of the Qi family disagreed, and then Qi Li opened the restaurant herself. Now only Jiang Hai and Qi Li held shares in the restaurant, so it wasn't so easy for others to make a move. Although it looks okay, I don't want to delay any longer. I have to resolve the situation with the Qi family as soon as possible. Jiang Hai muttered softly as he stroked his chin. As for dealing with Qi Song and Qi Yuanlong like he had dealt with the Yin family, that was impossible. But fortunately, the current Jiang Hai was much stronger than when he solved the Yin family. Problems that can be solved with money are not problems. If 100 million is not enough, then 200 million. If 200 million is not enough, then 500 million. If 500 million is not enough, then 1 billion. There is always a way to solve it. Jiang Hai said with a smile. In other people's eyes, this was a problem, but in Jiang Hai's eyes, it was not a headache. After watching the crosstalk for a while, Jiang Hai also left and went to his car. After getting in the car, he opened an ultrasound app on his phone according to the method Azalina taught him, and then carefully searched the car. Sure enough, it didn't take long for him to find 2 small bugs. According to the situation of those people, these people should be able to use satellites to find him, so they didn't need to locate him. They only needed to eavesdrop, but Jiang Hai wouldn't even let them eavesdrop. After removing the bugs and crushing them, Jiang Hai also drove the car. Although he didn't want to go to Qi Li's company, he still felt that it was better to take a look. He drove all the way, and soon the Chi Group's building was in front of him. After parking the car in the parking space in front of the Chi Group's main entrance, Jiang Hai got out of the car. This time, the front desk didn't stop him, and the security guards didn't stop him either. At present, the entire Chi Group, including the ants sweeping the floor, knew that this tall and ordinary-looking man was their President Chi's husband, and also one of the people in the company who couldn't be provoked. After getting into the elevator, Jiang Hai pressed the button for Chi Li's office floor. In his mind, he was thinking about how to solve this problem simply and violently. But when he came to the top floor, he just walked out and found that the atmosphere on this floor was a bit strange. This floor was terrifyingly quiet. Even when they were walking, they would deliberately lower their voices. After seeing Jiang Hai, most people would be a little surprised, then they would lower their heads and speed up their footsteps. Jiang Hai didn't catch them to ask what happened, because there was only one possibility to cause such an impact here. Chi Li was in trouble. Thinking of this, Jiang Hai quickly walked to Chi Li's office. But just as he walked over, he found that several security guards were standing in front of Chi Li's office at this time, blocking the office tightly. After seeing Jiang Hai coming, these security guards hesitated. They were told that no one was allowed to enter the office, but Jiang Hai, to be honest, they didn't want to be beaten because of a job, and the most important thing was that if they were beaten, they would probably lose their job. So after hesitating, these security guards chose to stand in place. Seeing that they were so obedient, Jiang Hai didn't make it difficult for these people. Instead, he walked directly into the office and pushed the door open. He found that Chi Li's originally big office was full of people at this time. These people were men and women, old and young. At a glance, there were about 20 people. Chi Li was sitting behind the desk with a gloomy face, and Du Ning was also standing beside her. These people were clearly divided into two groups. One group was more people, surrounding the desk in a half-moon shape, and the other group was standing behind Chi Li. It could be said that their positions were extremely clear. Who are you? This is an internal meeting of our Chi Group's shareholders. Those who have nothing to do with it, please leave. As soon as Jiang Hai walked in, he attracted a lot of attention. When they saw Jiang Hai, Chi Song's eyes sank, but he didn't say anything. Instead, a middle-aged woman who was closest to the door showed a trace of disgust after seeing Jiang Hai. She said unhappily. From her dress, it could be seen that she was a person who worshipped luxury goods. Everything on her was branded. Seeing that Jiang Hai dared to come in sportswear, it would be strange if she didn't feel disgusted. However, Jiang Hai looked at her and smiled disdainfully. He directly squeezed past her. In the crowd of people who were squeezed, Jiang Hai squeezed out of the crowd and came to Chi Li's side. Some people looked at her and asked what was going on. Seeing Jiang Hai come, Chi Li didn't know why, but she was relieved. It seemed that with Jiang Hai there was no need to worry. She shrugged and said to Jiang Hai, "Our restaurant is targeted by these guys. They are here to force us to abdicate." Seeing that Jiang Hai came, Chi Li didn't know why, but she was relieved. It seemed that with Jiang Hai here, there was no need to worry. Chapter 854. Abdicate? Humph, Miss Chi, don't think too highly of yourself. Do you think you're an emperor? Abdicate? We're just here to get what we deserve. Hearing Chi Li's words, before Jiang Hai could say anything, the middle-aged woman he had just knocked away had already shouted loudly. Hearing her words, many men frowned, but they didn't say anything. Instead, they continued to stay there. Although they also hated this woman, they were now on the same side. Tell me, what's going on? Hearing her words, Jiang Hai smiled disdainfully. He didn't even look at these people and directly asked Chi Li. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, a middle-aged man standing behind Chi Li took a step forward. Let me explain. Xiao Jiang, I don't know if you still recognize me. The middle-aged man walked over and looked at Jiang Hai with a trace of relief in his eyes. Then, he smiled and said to Jiang Hai, Uncle Zhao. Hearing this man's words, Jiang Hai was stunned for a moment. Chen Feng's shadow in the depths of his memory slowly overlapped with the middle-aged man in front of him. Yes, this man was none other than the vice president of the Qi group, Zhao Jianjun. He and Jiang Hai were old acquaintances. In fact, they had known each other since Jiang Hai was born. He was younger than Jiang Hai's father and Qi Li's father. Now, he was almost 50 years old. When Jiang Hai was born, he had just worked in the factory where Jiang Hai's father and Qi Li's father worked. Later, when Qi Li's father listened to Qi Song and went to the capital to make a living, he also went with him. Over the years, he had been through ups and downs. He had always been the right-hand man of Qi Li's father. He had a very important relationship with Qi Li, being able to smoothly take over the company. He was also the witness of Jiang Hai and Qi Li's marriage. Although he was the witness of their marriage, he wasn't that great. But from this, it could be seen that Zhao Jianjun was still very close to Jiang Hai and Qi Li. A few years ago, I was still thinking about the marriage between you and Qi Li. Now forget it, I won't say it. Patting Jiang Hai's shoulder, Zhao Jianjun looked at Jiang Hai with eyes full of joy. I really didn't expect that the little brat at that time would be able to control the existence of a company worth billions. A few years ago, I was still thinking about your marriage with Qi Li. In fact, to be honest, he had always felt a little sorry for Jiang Hai. After all, he could be regarded as an accomplice who pushed Jiang Hai into the fire pit of the Qi family, so he had always felt guilty towards Jiang Hai. But in his view, this was actually an opportunity. If the original Jiang Hai was really a talented person, then with his relationship with Qi Li, when they entered the company together, the husband and wife would have joined forces. K's mentality of having a common enemy might have made them get closer and closer. But he never thought that Jiang Hai was just mud. At that time, he was immersed in the death of his parents and didn't have the heart to manage the Qi family's company. He was also full of complaints towards Qi Li. Yes, he almost became a villain. But fortunately, Jiang Hai's temperament was not bad, so he didn't succeed in becoming a villain and stayed at home for more than a year. Then he got the Dragon Ball, and then there was today's development. That year, Zhao Jianjun saw the situation between Jiang Hai and Qi Li and was worried. He even took the initiative to tell Qi Li that they should give Jiang Hai a chance to prove himself. After all, Jiang Hai was her husband, the man who left a mark in her life. But later, when he found out that Jiang Hai's ability had also grown, his thoughts turned into gratification. But he also heard that Jiang Hai's private life had some problems, which gave him a headache. But at this time, Jiang Hai appeared here, which meant that he still had Qi Li in his heart. And as the son-in-law of the Qi family, he naturally had the right to know what was going on here. According to Zhao Jianjun's words, these people were indeed here to force the Qi family to abdicate. When Jiang Hai returned to China, he helped Hua Xia, so the higher-ups made the decision to exempt Jiang Hai and Qi Li's 4 restaurants from business tax. This meant that in addition to goods, labor, and water and electricity, there was pure profit here. At the beginning of the first year, it might not be much, but when the report came out last year, those people were shocked. Those 4 restaurants earned 300 million last year. The 300 million here referred to RMB, which also referred to the pure profit. In other words, the 300 million went into Qi Li's pocket. How could these people not be envious? The people present more or less had a few percent of the Qi family's shares. Those who had less than 1% were not qualified to stand here. This meant that if the 300 million were divided, they could at least get a few million, or even tens of millions. This was like giving out free money. Why wouldn't they be tempted? Therefore, under the lead of Qi Song and Qi Yuanlong, they immediately agreed to come here. Several board meetings were held to discuss the ownership of the 4 restaurants. Should they belong to Qi Li and Jiang Hai, or should they belong to the Qi family? It could be said that these people were really shameless. When Qi Li first said that she wanted to build a restaurant, none of these people were optimistic. Now that they saw the profits, they wanted to take advantage of the peach. Qi Li was naturally not a person to be trifled with. Qi Li held the shares of herself, her 2 younger sisters, and her mother. It directly exceeded the control of the shares. No matter what these people wanted, as long as she did not agree, there was no way to implement it. Because she was not only the biggest shareholder, but also the chairman and CEO. With such a concentration of power, how could others brazenly challenge her? Therefore, these people began to play tricks. They said that it was not good to use the shares to speak and that they wanted to raise their hands to vote. Chile would be a fool to pay attention to them. Seeing that Chile did not agree, these people came here to cause trouble. In fact, this was not the first time they came here to cause trouble. It was just that this time, Jiang Hai came here. Oh, so that's what happened. These shameless people. After hearing Zhao Jianjun's words, Jiang Hai smiled, then glanced at the people around him and said disdainfully. After hearing Jiang Hai's words, the people led by Qi Song suddenly became angry. Yesterday, Jiang Hai laughed and scolded them. They did not say anything because of Jiang Hai's martial arts. Now that Jiang Hai was clearly in a disadvantageous position, he actually dared to come and cause trouble for them. This guy was really courting death. Jiang Hai, this is our Qi family's business. Why are you blindly interfering? Looking at Jiang Hai, Qi Song could not help but stand up and point at Jiang Hai. Hearing Qi Song's words, the others also followed. That's right. The older generation hasn't spoken yet. How can a junior like you have the right to interrupt? I heard that Qi Li's husband came from an unorthodox background. I originally thought it was a rumor, but now it seems that it is not true. That's right. If it wasn't because he couldn't make a living, why would he leave his home and go to the United States? The ignorant are really fearless. Who does he think he is? How dare he point fingers in front of us? Listening to the scolding over there, Jiang Hai dug his ears. He had to admit that these guys were really noisy. Ignoring these people's scolding, Jiang Hai turned his head and looked at Qi Li and asked, Qi Group is a listed company, right? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qi Li also blinked. She was a little timid, but she still nodded. I remember that this branch company seems to have a way to dilute the shareholders' shares and then sell them to the public. Looking at Qi Li, Jiang Hai smiled and said to her, there is such a saying. The diluted shareholders can get all the money from the sale. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, although Qi Li still did not know what Jiang Hai wanted to do, she had a slight outline in her mind. Then these people, all of their shares, dilute them. I will buy them all. Pointing at all the people standing there, Jiang Hai said very calmly. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, in the room, except for Qi Li and Du Ning, everyone was stunned. They had never thought that Jiang Hai would dare to speak arrogantly. Did he think that he was buying fried chicken? Buying all of it? After a few seconds of silence, the people in the room began to quarrel. But this time, they were not scolding Jiang Hai for not respecting his elders, but saying that Jiang Hai's brain was damaged. He really couldn't see the situation clearly. Buying all of it. This was a bold statement, but there were less than 100 people in the country who had such ability. But coincidentally, they had all seen these people before. Even if Qi Song and the others knew that the beef was provided by Jiang Hai, they didn't think that Jiang Hai had the ability to buy it. Just like what young Master Zhang said, they didn't know Jiang Hai very well. They only knew that Jiang Hai raised cattle, but in their opinion, Jiang Hai's cattle were probably all supplied here. Those 4 restaurants were very profitable. Even if Qi Li gave all of it to him, it would only be 300 million yuan. What about the Qi Group now? After the fall of the Yin family, its market value was almost 30 billion yuan. Of course, it was referring to RMB. It was difficult to collect 1% of 300 million yuan, let alone all of it. Was there something wrong with his brain? Hey, Jiang Hai, do you know what you are talking about? You are still too young. I will pretend that I didn't hear this. Qi Li, now you hurry up. Looking at the reaction of the audience, Qi Liangkai couldn't help but smile. He walked forward and looked at Qi Li. But before he finished speaking, Jiang Hai directly took out a card from his pocket and threw it on the table. Pa. With a crisp sound, a shiny black card appeared in front of everyone. Looking at the card on the table, many people who saw it clearly couldn't help but take a deep breath because they were no stranger to this card. The American Express Company's 100 long black gold, unlimited limit. Chapter 855. Gulp. Seeing Jiang Hai throw the card on the table, many knowledgeable people subconsciously took a step back. Unlimited limit? What did that mean? It meant that even if Jiang Hai did not have so much money to buy everyone's shares, he could still borrow the bank's money to buy everyone's shares. This meant that regardless of whether it was his money or not, he was serious about what he said just now. But if you asked these people to sell their shares now, would they be willing to do so? Of course not. After the Qi family got rid of the Yin family last year, the total income for the first half of the year was 200 million yuan, and the income for the second half of the year was 1.3 billion yuan. In total, the net income for the year was 1.5 billion yuan. Among the shareholders present, the smallest one had received nearly 30 million yuan in dividends during the new year, plus nearly 10 million yuan in red packets. Now, their stock price was worth about 600 million yuan. In 10 years, no, in less than 10 years, they could earn back their capital and interest. Most importantly, being a shareholder of the Qi Group was also a symbol of status in society. Did the coal bosses in Jin province have money? They could spend hundreds of millions as they wished, but did they have any reputation in the circle of the rich? This was the difference in social status. A rich person without any reputation would have to put his face on the ground to curry favor with a mayor in the country. Even if it was a village head, he would mess with him if he wanted to. Even if it was a village head, he would not dare to go against a village head or a village party secretary. But for the people of the Qi family, even if they were not as rich as them, when they went to other places, the mayor or village head would have to curry favor with them. They might not be seen in the capital, but when they returned to their hometown, they would be influential figures. Now that Jiang Hai directly said that he would buy the shares and give them the money, it would be strange if these people were not afraid. Most importantly, without the protection of the Qi Group, they were not sure if the money would belong to them after they got it. Ahem, Xiao Jiang, why do you want so many shares? There's no need to owe the bank so much money just because of a moment of anger. I've heard that foreign banks are even scarier than domestic banks. Seeing that the atmosphere was a little stiff, Qi Yuanlong stood up and said to Jiang Hai with a smile. At the same time, he winked at Zhao Jianjun. He guessed that Zhao Jianjun did not want things to be too stiff. Indeed, he was right, although Zhao Jianjun hated them. But he did not want things to be too stiff. After all, Qi Yuanlong and Qi Song were Qi Li's father's relatives, and there were many old officials here. Moreover, he did not know how much money Jiang Hai had. He did not want Jiang Hai to owe the bank because of anger. That would not be worth it. So after thinking about it, he wanted to talk to Jiang Hai. But before he could say anything, Jiang Hai had already waved his hand and stopped him. Uncle Qi, you don't have to persuade me. I don't care about this little money. As for owing the bank, that's even more impossible. With a wave of his hand, Jiang Hai slowly walked to Qi Li's desk and leaned on it, facing Qi Yuanlong and the others. As for me, some people here know me, some people don't. My name is Jiang Hai, Qi Li's husband. 3 years ago, I went to the United States to raise cattle. The beef that is the main signature of the 4 restaurants you mentioned is mine. But domestic beef is not my main source of production. My main source of production is the Walmart Group in the United States and the royal family in Dubai. Looking at the people in front of him, Jiang Hai said very calmly. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, these people's faces became more and more ugly. They had heard of Walmart, the world's largest retailer, and the royal family in Dubai was even more familiar. Last year, I paid the taxes on my beef and sold it for more than $1 billion. Oh, I'm talking about dollars. This year, the main fish, pasture, and beef in my manor are sold for more than $1 billion every year. Now, I really don't know how much money is in this card, but at least $5 billion, there is. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, many people gasped. Including Zhao Jianjun, they didn't expect Jiang Hai to have so much money. Qi Li and Du Ning, the only people who knew about this, were looking at Jiang Hai with a smile. Qi Li really found that whenever Jiang Hai wanted to pretend to be rich, he was so charming. I'm not bragging. If I want to buy the entire cheese group, I can buy it. But for me, it's not necessary because the cheese group belongs to my wife. I don't care if you make some money with my wife. I didn't expect that you would dare to jump out and court death. You're really courting your own death. I think you don't even want this little money. Looking at these people with a faint smile, Jiang Hai said more and more. These people's faces became colder and colder. Now, they couldn't say anything. They did come with the intention of taking advantage of the situation, but now it seemed that they couldn't take advantage of it. Instead, they had to consider whether they should pay back. At this time, they couldn't help but look at Qi Song, who was standing in the front. After all, it was he who sent these people to make trouble. If they lost their shares, they didn't know what to do. Just as I said, I'll take all their shares. Seeing that these people were silent, Jiang Hai turned his head and said to Qi Li, hearing that Jiang Hai didn't seem to be joking, Qi Li nodded seriously. Then, she picked up the phone and prepared to call the Qi group's lawyer. She saw that Jiang Hai didn't just want to frighten them, but wanted to play a serious game. On this side, Qi Yuanlong, Qi Song, and the others were all panicking. Qi Liangkai directly jumped out of the crowd and wanted to snatch the phone, but Du Ning's speed was much faster than his. He immediately flipped over the boss's table and blocked in front of him. Qi Liangkai also knew about Du Ning. It wasn't a day or two that they wanted to deal with Qi Li, and naturally, they also investigated the people around Qi Li. This Du Ning was sent by Jiang Hai. At the same time, they also knew that Du Ning's means were not ordinary. She once took care of 3 bodyguards of young Master Zhang alone, and nothing happened to her. According to young Master Zhang's people, this person had seen blood and killed a lot of people. She was the world's top bodyguard or mercenary. At this time, Zhang Liangkai felt that his blood was about to turn cold when Du Ning glared at him. Shaoli, we're all relatives. There's no need to make things so awkward, right? We know that it's our fault for being greedy, but there's no need to take our shares, right? How can we be relatives in the future? Not daring to cross Du Ning's line, Qi Liangkai could only speak to Qi Li there. Listening to his voice, he really wanted to cry because he didn't know what to do. Among the people present, the leaders were Qi Song and Qi Yuanlong, but it was impossible for these 2 old men to be wrong. The only one who could be wrong was probably his big brother. Now, he could only make a Hail Mary effort. Stop pretending. You guys are all wolf cubs. If we let you go today, who knows when you'll come back and bite us. When I'm not around, there's no one to support my wife. So instead of this, it's better to just wipe you guys out. After taking your shares, I'll go offline and won't let you ingrates get close to my wife. Hearing Qi Liangcai's words, Qi Li's eyes showed some hesitation. Just like Zhao Jianjun said, there were many old officials and relatives among these people. It was not good for her to kill them all. At this time, Jiang Hai spoke for her. After hearing Jiang Hai's words, there was a trace of despair in these people's eyes. Jiang Hai and the others were serious. If they really killed them, they would lose their shares and the company would go offline. At that time, what was the use of the money that Jiang Hai gave them? Billions, this was something that some losers could only dream of. But if one's mind was not set, one would not know that sometimes having too much money was not necessarily a good thing. If a child walked on the street with a brick of gold, wouldn't that be waiting to be robbed? Without the protection of the Qi group, they were not much different from children. They knew better than anyone who was safer, a billionaire who had nothing but money or the shareholders of the Qi group. Especially here, this was Huaxia. Were you kidding? A place where a person's life and death could be decided with a word. Seeing the determination of Jiang Hai and the others, some people were already thinking about where they would go to live the rest of their lives after the shares were exchanged. More people looked at Qi Song, Qi Yuanlong, and Qi Liangkai with hatred. If it weren't for their flowery words, how could he have been blinded by lard? Instead of enjoying a superior status at home and enjoying so much bonus every year, he would have come here to seek death with them. What a sin! At this time, the three people were completely dumbfounded. They never thought that Jiang Hai would be so decisive. Most importantly, Jiang Hai had enough strength and stamina to throw out billions of dollars. They were really too naive. Qi Yuanlong suddenly remembered what his son had said when he came back last night. He had said that he had met with young Master Zhang. He had wanted to persuade young Master Zhang to deal with Jiang Hai, but young Master Zhang had refused. Qi Yuanlong had thought that young Master Zhang did not want to deal with Jiang Hai because he was afraid of causing gossip and rumors about him being ugly. Now it seemed that he had really been too naive. It seemed that he knew Jiang Hai's background. He knew that Jiang Hai wasn't someone he could casually bully, so he was scared. He was scared, but he still sent his people to charge and break through the enemy lines. Now it seems like they were all trapped, and they didn't have any way to get out of this predicament. Chapter 856. What should we do? What should we do? Qi Yuanlong walked to Qi Song's side and kept whispering. Qi Yuanlong knew his own family situation. Like his son, Qi Yuanlong used to fantasize that he was a business genius. Of course, because the company was still helmed by Qi Li's father, although he lost a lot of money, he did not touch the foundation of the company. Now that he was older, his ambition had also been restrained. Now he was basically trying to smooth things over by asking for benefits. However, he never thought that the only time he was greedy in his old age would be when he had to face such a decision. Qi Li's father was easy to deal with. He was his biological brother, and the two of them grew up together. Naturally, it was impossible to kill him. He was a real relative. However, Qi Li did not think so now. In the past few years, he knew better than anyone how much Qi Li hated him. Most importantly, they were now living their own lives. The relationship between their families was not very good. Now that Jiang Hai was in charge, there was really nothing he could do about it. He could only keep asking Qi Song what to do. He did not want to let go of the power in his hands. Jiang Hai, you are determined to go against us. Hearing Qi Yuanlong's words, Qi Song was also a little scared at this time. He did not think that Jiang Hai would dare to control the existence of the Qi family. Actually, Qi Song did not take Jiang Hai seriously from the beginning. He really did not think that Jiang Hai and Qi Li would be such a big deterrent. Thinking of this, Qi Song took a step forward and said loudly to Jiang Hai. Go against you? No, I'm just privatizing the Qi family. It's that simple, and you will get the money. I've put the real money here. This is what you want. It's that simple. Looking at Qi Song in front of him, Jiang Hai smiled disdainfully. Then, he looked at Qi Li and asked if she had made the call. I've already informed the company's lawyer. He's now coming over with the transfer procedures. Looking at Jiang Hai's gaze, Qi Li also smiled. Suddenly, she felt a little tired. As a woman, when dealing with some small matters in the company, she was still very good, but when dealing with these big matters, she was a little indecisive. Although she usually pretended to be cold, she knew in her heart that sometimes she thought too much. As the old saying in Hua Xia goes, the merciful do not command soldiers, emotions do not make decisions, righteousness do not grasp wealth, and kindness do not make officials. As a woman, her emotional nature made it impossible for her to be as decisive as Jiang Hai and act boldly and decisively against these old officials. Suddenly, she even felt a little emotional. It would be great if Jiang Hai could manage the Qi family with her. However, this thought only flashed through her mind because she knew Jiang Hai's character very well. This guy was used to being free. If you let him manage the company now, it would be more difficult than killing him. Most importantly, he was used to crushing others. Seeing that Qi Li had finished, Jiang Hai also smiled. Then, he looked at the people in front of him curiously. He wanted to see what these guys could do. Qi Li's words were not only heard by Jiang Hai, but also by these people. Everyone, this adulterous couple is not going to give us a way out. Let's fight with them. Qi Liangkai saw that Jiang Hai was really going to kill them all. At this time, he couldn't help but be so anxious that his eyes turned red. And the people who were like him were the people behind him. So, he rolled his eyes and a vicious plan came to his mind. With a loud roar, he wanted to encourage the shareholders who had lost their shares to riot. As soon as he shouted, many people responded, especially the auntie just now. She rushed to the front without saying anything. "You little bitch, you dare to take my shares. I will fight with you." The auntie made threatening gestures and rushed directly to Qi Li, but Du Ning was faster. He took a step forward, grabbed the person's hand, and pulled her forward. Then, he hit the person's chest with his knee. The huge impact directly smashed the woman back. She lay on the ground and couldn't get up. Other people saw that Du Ning still dared to fight back, so they didn't say anything. They rushed over like crazy and were ready to fight, but at this time, the security guards who were originally guarding the door squeezed into this office. The leader was none other than Zhao Jianjun. Just now, when Zhao Jianjun saw that the situation was not good, he had already gone out to call these security guards. Now it was just right. Block these guys from me and then drive them out of the office. From now on, they are no longer shareholders of Qi's group. After seeing the security guards come in, Qi Li also stood up with a cold face and said loudly. Hearing Qi Li's words, these security guards naturally knew who paid them, so they directly pushed these people out of the door. No matter how weak these security guards were, they were still young and strong, far from being comparable to these middle-aged and old people. They were directly driven out. At this time, the security guards were also in place. Two of them carried one person and went directly to the elevator. They would be directly driven out. Their shares were entrusted to the lawyer. As long as the company's lawyer came, Jiang Hai would sign the contract and then transfer the money to their cards, then they would have nothing to do with Qi's group. Seeing that there was no room to turn things around, these people also shouted here. Some other people were already thinking about how to escape at this time. Yes, escape. These people's butts were not clean. They used to be shareholders, so it was not good to say anything, but now that they were no longer shareholders, things were troublesome. There were probably a lot of people who would come to find them. You will die a horrible death. You will go to the 18th level of hell. I will not let you go even if I become a ghost. Listening to the roars of these people before they left, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile. He had to admit that people were really the most shameless animals in the world. These guys could come to force him to abdicate, but he couldn't take their shares. How could there be such a reason in the world? It was true that only the state officials were allowed to set a fire, but the common people were not allowed to light a lamp. And the most important thing was that the position of the state officials and the common people were the opposite. You know, the Qi family was the major shareholder. Only the common people were allowed to set a fire, but the state officials were not allowed to light a lamp. Even in the whole world, there was no such reason, right? This time, you are our biggest shareholder. Seeing these people being taken away, Qi Li also suppressed the thoughts in her heart. Since Jiang Hai had decided, then she naturally could only support Jiang Hai's idea. Thinking of this, she couldn't help but look at Jiang Hai and said with a smile. Hearing what she said, Jiang Hai also chuckled. Yes, if you don't listen to me in the future, I will dismiss you as the chairman. Hearing what Qi Li said, Jiang Hai also leaned over, hugged her waist, tapped her nose and said with a smile. Humph. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qi Li also wrinkled her small nose. She didn't believe that Jiang Hai would dismiss her. Ahem, I say, today's matter is over. As for what you said, little Jiang, about the privatization of the company. Looking at Jiang Hai and Qi Li acting as if there was no one else around, Zhao Jianjun also coughed softly, then said to the two with a smile. Hearing Zhao Jianjun interrupt her, Qi Li couldn't help but blush, then she sat down again, but she also looked at Jiang Hai. She also wanted to know what Jiang Hai meant in this regard. Privatization must continue. I don't intend to make money for others, but for the shares of the uncles here, if you want to sell, I will buy them at 1.5 times the market price. If you don't want to sell, you can continue to make money in the company, but privatization and delisting are inevitable. Hearing Zhao Jianjun's words, Jiang Hai thought for a moment and said very seriously. Originally, whether Qi's group would be delisted or not had nothing to do with Jiang Hai, but since it had come to this point, delisting was inevitable. The so-called listing was to expand the company's influence, using some shares to exchange for private property to expand the company. There were basically two reasons for delisting. The first was because the company was bankrupt and had to be delisted. The second was because the company had expanded to the limit. Moreover, the company's senior management was no longer willing to make money with the shareholders. They wanted to make money by themselves. Therefore, delisting was inevitable. Jiang Hai didn't have the slightest interest in the listing advocated by those financial scholars. His Tinglong company, his manor, and his brand were not listed now, and he was not short of money. Why should he be listed? He had to make money with others. He could make money by himself. Although the influence may not be as good as that of a listed company, the current Qi's group and Jiang Hai did not need any influence. Hearing Jiang Hai's resolute words, Zhao Jianjun and others also looked at each other. They saw the determination of Jiang Hai. After Jiang Hai annexed the shares of these people, he and Qi Li's family had shares, and there were also the scattered shares on the market. Together, they had nearly 85% of all the shares. Zhao Jianjun held 5%, and the remaining 4 people held 2% and 3%, adding up to 10%. Even if they objected with 15%, it was useless. The matter was decided in this way. Looking at Jiang Hai's decisive look, Zhao Jianjun could not help but sigh. He really didn't think that since the death of Qi Li's father, the company's biggest crisis would be so calm under Jiang Hai's understatement of strength. It wasn't that he hadn't thought about it before, but he didn't want to play with those people anymore. But they did not have that kind of strength, and now Jiang Hai was really a fierce dragon. Chapter 857. What happened next had unknowingly become much simpler. In fact, it was not too complicated. When Jiang Hai was willing to spend 7.6 billion yuan to buy the shares in these people's hands, things became very simple. With money, lawyers, determination, and no external interference, the Qi Group's integration was really fast. Jiang Hai had only stayed in the capital for a few days, but he had already become the largest natural shareholder of the Qi Group. He owned 25.3% of the shares alone. Qi Li, Qi Jia, Qia, and Qi Li's mother did not account for 20%. These 4 people together only accounted for 60%. With Jiang Hai's participation, it was equivalent to Jiang Hai and the others accounting for 85.3%. Zhao Jianjun and the others understood very well. Of course, it was impossible for them to withdraw their shares. They were all willing to listen to Jiang Hai and Qi Li's ideas, so the Qi Group was actively preparing for the withdrawal at this time. On the other hand, Qi Song and Qi Yuanlong's house was surrounded by angry shareholders that night. Now that they were angry in their hearts, they needed a place to vent their anger. They did not dare to provoke Jiang Hai. Qi Li couldn't be provoked either. If they came to find trouble, it was inevitable that they would die. Of course, there were also some people who hoped that they could shamelessly act pitiful in exchange for their shares, but this was simply impossible. After learning that this road had been sealed, these people vented their anger on the 2 sinners, Qi Song and Qi Yuanlong. Because of this, the 2 families did not dare to return home. That night, they went to find young Master Zhang. Young Master Zhang's real name was Zhang Quan, and he still had some power in the country. The details of these forces appeared in front of Jiang Hai that night. Although Du Ning was not a specialized intelligence agent, he was still able to gather information. However, as long as Jiang Hai and the others wanted to find out this information, it was not a difficult thing to do. Zhang Quan's family situation was similar to that of the Red Three generations that often appeared in urban novels. His grandfather used to be a major general in the founding of the country, but after those people retired, his grandfather finally became a lieutenant general. His father had a total of 3 brothers. His eldest uncle was in the army and was now a brigadier general and chief of staff in a military region. His father was on the official road and was currently a municipal official in a prefecture-level city. His third uncle was in business and was now running a company that combined private and Chinese companies. It had to be admitted that such an identity was already an easy existence in other novels. Unfortunately, for Jiang Hai, this was reality, not a novel. If Jiang Hai was just an ordinary person who knew how to raise cattle, some melodramatic things might happen, but the problem was that Jiang Hai was not an ordinary person. He was one of the few big farm owners in the eastern United States. He was the biggest personal cash cow in Massachusetts. He even had some connections with the Republican Party in the United States. He had connections with the former godfather of television in the United States. He had close ties with the royal family in Dubai. He had business dealings with South Korea. Such a person was no longer someone the third generation could touch. Only his eldest uncle had the right to choose the enemy for their family. Jiang Hai was a rich man who did not develop in the country. No matter which force it was, they would want to curry favor with Jiang Hai. It was absolutely impossible for them to become enemies with Jiang Hai. Unknowingly, Jiang Hai had grown into a towering tree. His strength was obvious to all. Although Jiang Hai's cattle made money, they all knew how difficult it was to get into the cattle business. Therefore, it was better not to earn money. Therefore, Qi Song and Qi Yuanlong were driven out without seeing anyone that night. Knowing that the matter had been settled, the two of them couldn't help but sigh helplessly. Since things had already come to this, what else could they do? Qi Song was still fine. Without the Qi Group's shares, he still had some business in the capital. Don't forget that Qi Song had come to the capital first before calling Qi Li's father over. Originally, his business in the capital was much bigger than Qi Li's father's. Although he had mainly focused on the Qi Group, his own business had not been closed down. Apart from the 8% shares of the Qi Group, his other businesses added together were worth about a few billion yuan. Even if he lost the biggest part, he still had the ability to protect himself. It was just that the company had fallen from a first-class company that had borrowed the Qi Group's prestige to a second-class or even third-class existence. However, he could still establish himself. As for Qi Yuanlong, it was over. That night, he told his son, Qi Zhengtao, that he wanted to return to Bingcheng. Recently, they had been preparing intensely. As for Qi Zhengtao's wife, LVC, she had also been implicated. To Qi Li, LVC was originally a useful person. To be honest, her standards were not much worse than Qi Li's. It was just that she had chosen the wrong side. Business was similar to politics. A new emperor would bring in new ministers. You had rebelled and rebelled before, and you were also a core member. Therefore, Qi Li would definitely not use her again. This was considered a loss of a talent. No matter what these people thought or what they thought, Jiang Hai felt a lot more relaxed at this time. The crisis of the Qi family was solved by him so quickly. Not only was the Qi family safe, but his and Qi Li's 4 restaurants were also safe. However, the only thing that made him a little unhappy was that Qi Li was obviously busy these days. Jiang Hai's shares were also entrusted to Qi Li. He was too lazy to care about these things. These days, if he was not at home, he was walking around the capital. Unfortunately, he did not have many friends in the capital. The only person he knew was the person he met in Dapan Garden when he went to buy the white jade bed. However, they were not very close. Therefore, Jiang Hai was quite bored staying here all day. At this time, he received a call from Fu Yuan, telling him that Xiang Hua's wife had given birth to a son. Therefore, Jiang Hai decided to return to Bing City. Logically speaking, if Jiang Hai wanted to return to Bing City, Qi Li should also follow him. However, recently, Jiang Hai's acquisition project and privatization made her very busy. There was no way for her to leave. In the end, she could only book a ticket for Jiang Hai to Bing City. Soon, the day arrived. Jiang Hai, Qi Li, and Du Ning spent a night together. The next morning, he took a car and went to the airport by himself. In fact, Qi Li and Du Ning had already woken up, but they knew that Jiang Hai didn't like to be separated, so they didn't wake up. However, Qi Li secretly made up her mind that she must integrate this place as soon as possible and then go to find Jiang Hai. At this time, Jiang Hai didn't think about this. He was just thinking about whether he should buy something for Xiang Hua's son when he went back. As mentioned before, Jiang Hai and his friends gave the same amount of red packets. If they gave 1,000, then they would give 1,000. If they gave 500, then they would give 500. There was no such thing as giving more red packets to those with better financial conditions. Jiang Hai didn't care about it, but he also had to consider Fu Yuan and Su Wei, so they gave 1,000 yuan each. However, he knew that Xiang Hua's family wasn't very well off. He could give some other small things, but this wasn't a gift. After thinking about it, except for some children's clothes, there didn't seem to be anything else. Therefore, before he left, he specially went with Qi Li to buy some children's clothes. This could be considered her kind intentions. After getting on the plane, Jiang Hai put his things away and sat in the first-class cabin of the domestic flight. This plane was a small plane. The so-called first-class cabin was just a sofa that was more comfortable for 4 people in a row. It wasn't like the first-class cabins on international flights. For example, Jiang Hai's plane had its own exclusive space. He could lie down, watch TV, play on the computer, and play with his mobile phone. It was just that there was no signal. He could also make calls, but he had to use a satellite phone. The phone cost was very expensive, and the soundproofing effect was excellent. He could see the sky outside. If he wanted to eat something, there was a special chef on the plane who would cook it for him and deliver it to him after it was done. There was a special bathroom in the bathroom. Everyone could take a shower in half an hour. Of course, this was limited to first-class passengers. The domestic small planes didn't have so many options. Of course, the ticket price wasn't expensive enough to buy a car. After getting on the plane, Jiang Hai checked his luggage and buckled his seatbelt. He was ready to sleep. Beijing was not far from Bing City. It took 7 hours to get there by train, and it took about 2 hours to get there by plane. So before Jiang Hai woke up, the plane had already landed at Bing City Taiping Airport. After getting off the plane, Jiang Hai couldn't help but see the people in the waiting hall. Oh, it was really complete. Su Wei, Fu Yuan, Xianghua, Huang Yunfei, and 2 of Jiang Hai's former friends. One was Wang Yong. This person was Jiang Hai's elementary school and junior high school classmate. He wasn't a good person. Sometimes he was quite righteous, but sometimes he was a little depressed. He especially liked to listen to his wife. Although his wife was not married yet, she had been with him for 5 or 6 years. She was very obedient. Wang Yong's high school classmate was Wang Yong's high school classmate. His character was a little timid, but fortunately, because Jiang Hai didn't hang out with Wang Yong in the later years, Wu Ming, who he met through Wang Yong, didn't hang out with him too much. But today, it seemed that everyone was quite complete. Yeah, you came back by yourself. Where's your harem? Seeing that only Jiang Hai came back with a bag, Su Wei asked him with some doubts. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also shrugged gently. What harem? How many girlfriends does this guy have? Hearing Su Wei's words, Wang Yong also asked with some doubts. Hearing what he said, the people next to him also told him, and everyone began to laugh. You're tuning in to the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.